The music is still playing, and while the bride kneels in white silk holding her dying husband as his blood spreads through her dress. In the candlelight of a perfect wedding ballroom, Elena Varley becomes a widow before she ever becomes a wife. Around her, crystal shatters, guests scream, and the dream collapses into gunfire. Then Marcus steps through the smoke, scarred, cold, almost inhuman, and claims her with 5 terrifying words. From that moment on, this is no longer a love story. It becomes a funeral wrapped in obsession, betrayal, and a slow-burning war between duty, desire, and the kind of grief that never leaves a family alive.
The first dance had scarcely begun before the pristine symbolism of Elena Varley's white dress was violently reimagined in crimson. She had married Adrian, the ostensibly gentle scion of the city's preeminent crime family, viewing him as an escape from a world of shadow. This proved to be a fatal miscalculation. He perished in her arms, a casualty of the violence that permeated their wedding day. The true horror, however, manifested when his ruthless, scarred brother, Marcus, stepped over Adrian's cooling body. His gaze held not sorrow but a consuming fire as he uttered the 5 words that fractured her reality. "You belong to me now." To comprehend how Elena survives in a world where affection and a weapon are indistinguishable, one must witness the brutal conclusion. The Varley estate, a facade of elegance, had yet to reveal its true nature as a 5-star abattoir. The estate was a study in curated perfection, with its marble columns, crystal fixtures, and gardens of an almost artificial beauty. It was on these grounds just 3 months prior that Elena, on Adrian's arm, had accepted his narrative of safety, the promise of his family as an impenetrable fortress against the life she was fleeing. She willed herself to embrace this illusion, silencing the internal alarms that screamed a warning. Now, within the bridal suite, her gown pooled around her like spilled milk as she confronted her reflection. The dress itself represented more than her mother's annual income. The diamonds at her throat were undeniably real. The smile she wore, however, was entirely counterfeit. "You look stunning," remarked Maria, the elderly attendant, her hands gentle as she adjusted the veil. Yet Elena perceived a profound sadness in the woman's eyes, the look one gives a sacrificial offering, not a bride. "Thanks," Elena murmured, feeling less like a woman of beauty and more like a negotiated asset. The Varlis required a bride with a flawless public image, an outsider to serve as a legitimate front. Adrian required a wife to appease his father, and Elena required sanctuary from the syndicate that had murdered her own father and now pursued her. She had rationalized the arrangement as a mutually beneficial contract. Adrian, to his credit, had upheld his part, performing a convincing courtship with formal dinners and practiced conversation during their brief engagement. His kind eyes and disarming smile were a departure from the predatory men she knew. "I know this isn't your ideal circumstance," he confessed one evening, "but I will treat you well, Elena. I promise." With no other options available, she chose to accept his word. A knock at the door startled her. "It is time," Maria announced softly. Elena's hands trembled as she took her bouquet of white roses, every detail meticulously engineered to project an aura of purity, a beautifully constructed deception. The ceremony itself unfolded in a surreal haze. The estate's ballroom was transformed into a fantasia of white blossoms, gold leaf, and a profusion of candles that seemed to threaten conflagration. Hundreds of guests filled the space, politicians and titans of industry whose smiles revealed only teeth. The Varley family occupied the front rows, presiding like royalty over their court. Elena's side of the aisle, by contrast, was conspicuously bare. She had no family left to invite, and no friends who would risk attending a Varley gathering. save for a few distant relatives present from obligation. At the altar, Adrien was the very portrait of a gentleman. As she reached him, he took her hand, offering a gentle, reassuring pressure. "You are doing perfectly," he whispered. The officiant began to speak, but the words were lost to Elena. Her attention was fixed on the man standing behind Adrien, his best man, his brother, Marcus Farley. She had encountered him only once before, at a family dinner, where he remained silent, his dark, inscrutable eyes appraising her as others made conversation. Adrien had explained that Marcus operated outside the public eye, managing the family's security, a euphemism for its violent enforcement. Where Adrien was conventionally handsome, Marcus was a man of harsh angles and visceral power, taller, broader, with a face that looked as if it were hewn from stone and then fractured. A scar traced a white path from his left eyebrow to his jaw, bisecting his stubble. His suit was impeccably tailored, yet he wore it like a restraint. The manner in which he watched her held neither admiration nor curiosity. Marcus looked at her as if she were a complex variable he was about to neutralize, or a critical flaw he intended to correct. Elena tore her gaze away, compelling herself to focus on Adrien as they exchanged vows. His voice was steady, seemingly sincere. For the kiss, he inclined his head with care as if she were fragile. The guests applauded. The music began, the transaction was complete. She was now Elena Varley, an asset of a lethal dynasty. The reception commenced immediately. Champagne circulated endlessly as a string quartet provided a delicate score for the forced laughter and hollow dialogue. This was not a marriage, but a contract ratified before an audience. Elena maintained a smile until her facial muscles ached, shaking innumerable hands and forgetting names as they were spoken. The congratulations offered were as vacant as the glasses they held. Adrien remained at her side, performing the role of the devoted husband, though the rigidity in his shoulders betrayed his unease. His eyes swept the room incessantly like a man anticipating a detonation. "Are you all right?" Elena whispered during a brief lull. "I'm fine," he replied, too quickly. "So many faces. It is difficult to watch them all." "It is the security, is it not?" He seemed surprised by her perception. "My father invited some associates, who are not on friendly terms. It is managed. Marcus has his men everywhere. Nothing is going to happen." But the whiteness of his knuckles on his champagne flute suggested he was reassuring himself more than her. Elena's gaze followed his across the room. Near the entrance stood Marcus, a figure sculpted from shadow, his eyes performing a methodical sweep of the guests. He was a predator sifting through potential threats, every muscle coiled with readiness. Then, for a fleeting moment, his eyes met Elena's. The sheer force of his stare was physically arresting. It was not desire. She was certain it was not. It was something far darker, more layered. Perhaps it was anger or even resentment, as if he held her accountable for a transgression she had not yet committed. She was the first to break eye contact. "Dance with me?" Adrien asked, extending his hand. "The first dance, I suppose. Another photo opportunity." Elena allowed him to lead her to the floor. The ensemble shifted to a waltz, and Adrien drew her close, just enough to appear romantic for the cameras, yet maintaining a safe distance. His hand rested lightly on her waist. "You are doing beautifully," he said as they moved. "I know this is not easy." "It is fine," Elena lied. "After tonight, things will become simpler. We will find our rhythm. I meant what I promised. I will look after you." She desperately wanted to believe him. She clung to the hope that this fabricated marriage could function, that a semblance of a life was possible here. They moved in time with the melody. The floor became a swirl of other couples, a montage of feigned smiles, anxious businessmen, and whispering women. And with every turn, she could see Marcus in the periphery, ever watchful, ever assessing. "Why does your brother hate me?" The question escaped her before she could suppress it. Adrian's movement faltered. "What? Marcus does not hate you." "He looks at me as if I do not know, as if I have personally wronged him." "Marcus looks at everyone that way. Do not take it personally." But his tone was strained. "He is protective. He does not trust easily. Give him time." "Time?" As if time could amend the way Marcus's gaze seared through her, as though she were an anomaly to be eradicated. The music swelled. Adrian spun her gracefully. For one infinitesimal moment, Elena nearly succumbed to the illusion, a bride, her husband secure. Then the first gunshot tore through the music. It originated from near the doors. It was a sharp report that cleaved through the sound of violins and conversation. For a brief second, the scene froze, as if the room collectively wished the sound away. Then a scream shattered the stillness, and the ballroom descended into utter pandemonium. Adrian's hand clamped onto Elena's wrist, pulling her downward as more shots rang out. They fell to the marble floor amid the sound of breaking glass and panicked cries. Elena could not see the assailant, only a chaotic blur of fleeing figures and collapsing forms. "Stay down!" Adrian shouted, attempting to shield her with his body, but then he convulsed violently and his grip on her wrist suddenly loosened. A crimson stain blossomed on the white fabric of his shirt, expanding with sickening velocity. Adrian. He became a dead weight, a final, crushing embrace pulling them both to the floor. His eyes were wide with a question that would remain unasked. "Adrian." Elena's arms encircled him, the warmth of his blood saturating her gown, a heat that felt profoundly wrong. A wet whisper escaped his lips. "No, no, Elena, run!" She would not. "I'm not leaving you." He repeated the word, his voice weaker. "Run!" The focus receded from his eyes. There was so much blood. Elena pressed her hands to the wound, a futile gesture against the inevitable, for she recognized the face of death. The wedding music continued to play as the light faded from Adrian's eyes, and he was gone. In a heartbeat, the illusion of civilized celebration shatters into a symphony of violence. Gunfire erupts, screams echo, and crystal rains down like fractured promises. Elena becomes a fixed point in the storm, a living statue paralyzed by the scene. The life of her new husband paints her gown, her hands, her very being. From this trance, a steel-like grip pulls her back to reality, a brutal anchor promising a bruise. She meets the eyes of Marcus. Blood marks his face. His suit is torn, but his gaze is a void, mirroring none of the surrounding carnage. "Let go," she pleads, a futile struggle. His hold only constricts. "You must move, now." And then, the words that collapse her world. "Adrian is dead, and you are next if you remain." He offers no choice, merely a command as he pulls her from Adrian's side, away from the ballroom now transformed into a theater of war. Elena's limbs are disconnected from her will, her ruined dress a constant impediment as Marcus forges a path toward a side exit. The room is a tableau of slaughter. Varelli's loyalists clash with masked assailants over the fallen. This opulent hall is now nothing more than an abattoir. Marcus forces open a service door, thrusting her into a cold, concrete corridor where the cacophony of battle softens to a dull, distant pulse. "Stay here," Marcus commands, the order preempting the question forming on her lips. He is already turning back, producing a handgun from his jacket with chilling ease. His movements are those of a predator, entirely alien to the man who just lost a brother. Elena sinks against the wall, her body racked with tremors. Her wedding gown has become a shroud, a canvas painted with Adrian's lifeblood. Her hands refuse to still. He is gone. Her gentle Adrian, the man who was her shield, was executed on the very night that was meant to be their genesis. And now his brother returns to the inferno, a terrifying specter of vengeance she does not recognize. The gunfire begins to subside. Each minute stretches into an age. Elena anchors herself to the frantic rhythm of her own heart, a desperate effort to remain upright. The door bursts open and she flinches. It is Marcus, weapon still drawn, his hands now entirely crimson. Whose blood she cannot know. "Is it over?" Her voice is a fragile thread. "For now?" He holsters the firearm, his gaze finally settling upon her. He performs a clinical assessment, the blood-soaked dress, the tremors, the tear-streaked face, as if taking inventory of a salvaged asset. A fleeting, unreadable emotion crosses his features and vanishes. "Can you walk?" she affirms with a nod, a lie she prays her body will honor. He simply turns and walks, expecting her compliance. She wills her legs to function, following him like a specter through the mansion's unseen arteries. They pass armed men with grim expressions, their attire bearing the marks of combat. A silent understanding hangs in the air. They emerge in a private wing, still luxurious but without the ballroom's opulence. Marcus halts before a bedroom door and opens it. Elena hesitates. The chamber is large, yet Spartan. A bed, a dresser, dark curtains drawn. It is a gilded cage, beautiful and sterile. "Inside," Marcus states. It is not a request, but an unbreakable edict. She complies, and he follows, the door closing behind them with a soft, final sound. The silence that fills the room is a tangible, suffocating weight. Marcus is the first to break it, his phone in hand. It's done. 12 of theirs, 6 of ours. Adrian is gone. His tone is utterly devoid of emotion, like an accountant reading a ledger. "No, she is with me. I have it handled." He terminates the call, his cold, analytical eyes returning to her. "Remove the dress." The words are a chill against her skin. "What?" "You're covered in his blood. The bathroom is through there. Shower. There are clothes. Closet." He issues directives, not comfort to his brother's grieving widow. "I want to see Adrian." "No." "He's my husband." "Was." The single word hangs in the air, a blade of cruel finality as he closes the distance between them. He does not touch her, yet his presence is an oppressive force, consuming the very air she breathes. Adrian's body is being managed. "You will shower, you will change, and you will wait here until my return. You can't simply lock me in here. I can do precisely as I wish." His voice drops, now laced with steel. "You are in my home, under my protection. You will follow my directives. Is that understood?" Elena's throat constricts. This is not a brother's grief. This is a warden dictating terms. Total control. She is entirely subject to his will. "Why?" she whispers. A flicker of what might be dark humor touches his scarred face. "Because you have value." "Because they will come for you. Because whether you like it or not, you are a Varelli now." He leans closer, his voice a quiet menace. "And because I'm certain you will run at the first opportunity." I have nowhere to go. Precisely. Marcus withdraws. Shower, change, the windows are alarmed, the door will be guarded. Do not do anything foolish. He turns, his hand on the doorknob. Marcus, her voice fractures. What happens now? He pauses, silent for a long moment. When he finally responds, his voice is quiet, almost pensive. That, he says, the word soft and absolute, is entirely up to you. He departs, and the metallic click of the lock is a final, brutal punctuation. For a moment, Elena is utterly still, then her strength evaporates. She collapses to the floor, the ruined gown pooling around her as she finally succumbs to a storm of grief. Adrian was gone, her shield, her promise of safety, her gentle love extinguished. In his place stood Marcus, a terrifying force who viewed her as both a liability and a prize, and who had just become her jailer. She believed her marriage was an escape. Instead, it was the trigger for a far deadlier trap. At last, the tears cease. Elena rises, unsteady but resolute. She understood that remaining a ruin on the floor was not an option. The bathroom was as cold and impersonal as the bedroom, offering no solace. With trembling hands, she sheds the destroyed dress, a second skin of dried blood, and lets it fall. In the shower, the water runs red, a futile attempt to wash away the evidence of Adrian's death and the ghost of their future. She stands motionless until the water runs clear, then ice cold. The closet holds only men's clothing, Marcus's. She selects the smallest shirt and a pair of sweatpants. They feel like an erasure of the bride she was hours ago. Dressed in the clothes of her captor, she sits on the bed and begins her vigil. As night envelops the world outside the oppressive curtains, she finds no rest, in a sleep haunted by nightmares, her body tensing at every phantom noise. The turn of the lock, impossibly late, or perhaps tragically early, announces his arrival. Marcus enters bearing a tray, a sparse offering of a sandwich, fruit, and water. He places it on the dresser, his features obscured by that familiar, impenetrable mask of cold control. "Eat," he commands, the single word a shard of ice. She remains motionless. "The men who came for us," she ventures. "They are gone," he replies, his voice a vacuum of emotion. "The ones we located." He assumes a position against the wall, a sentinel in a fresh black shirt and trousers, yet the residue of violence clings to him like a second skin. "And the ones we did not, they will be addressed." "Who were they?" she presses. "Does the name matter?" "Yes." Her hands tighten into fists, small anchors of defiance. "Your brother gave his life for me. I am owed the names of his killers." At the mention of Adrian, a fissure appears in Marcus's composure, a flicker of pain or rage or both before it is sealed over. "Business rivals," he states flatly. They believed an attack at a wedding would be a statement. A muscle in his jaw clenches. Their calculation was flawed. What statement? That the Varellis are weakened, exposed. He begins to pace, a predator confined. "My father's empire was built on terror. Adrian was our public face, the civilized veneer for a brutal enterprise. Tonight demonstrated that strategy is a comprehensive failure." Elena observes his restless movement, the embodiment of a predator. "And what are you?" Marcus halts and fixes his gaze on her. "I am the shadow that permits the family its pretense of respectability." "The one who kills." "Yes." The admission is direct, unadorned, and more chilling than any lie. "Why am I here? If I were a threat, you would have killed me." "So what is my purpose?" Marcus watches her, a slow, appraising smirk touching his lips, devoid of all warmth. "You are more perceptive than you appear." Answer me." "You are a playing piece," he states with stark simplicity. "Your family name has influence, and you are Adrian's widow. That makes you an asset to our adversaries. Therefore, until I determine how to proceed with you, you will remain here, where I command every variable. I am a person, not a variable. In my world," Marcus steps closer, his gaze intense, "everyone is a variable. You desire the truth? Here it is. I never wanted Adrian to marry you. I told him it was a foolish gambit, that introducing an outsider to this family was inviting disaster. But he was obstinate. He claimed you required protection, that we owed your father a debt." Elena's heart falters. "You knew my father?" "Everyone in our world knew Anthony Costa. He was in our employ for 15 years before he made the fatal error of attempting to leave." Marcus's expression hardens into stone. "Adrian persuaded our father to permit his peaceful departure, to let him take his daughter and vanish." And just like that, this illusion of security was obliterated by the very rivals he had fled. The world began to lose its axis. "Are you implying my father was an operative for the Varellis?" "He was the architect of our finances. He knew the origin and destination of every single dollar. His desire for an exit transformed him from our most valuable asset into our most significant liability." Marcus observed her, his gaze devoid of empathy. Adrian was consumed by the guilt of it all. He viewed this marriage as some form of penance. I warned him it was a fool's errand, that you would become a beacon for our adversaries. And predictably, he is gone, and my prediction was proven correct. Marcus's tone descended into a chilling void. "But his death means his ledger now falls to me, and that includes his wife." The tremors returned to Elena's hands. The entire narrative of her existence, every piece of history Adrian had constructed for her, was a masterful deceit. Her father was no mere bookkeeper caught in a tragic accident. He was a linchpin in their enterprise. Adrian's marriage proposal was not an act of salvation, but one of atonement. "I want an end to this," she breathed, her voice a fragile thread. "No, you offered my use of you. Very well, announce my availability to your enemies. Let them come for me. I am finished with this existence." Marcus crossed the room with an unreal velocity. One moment he was a silhouette against the far wall. The next, his hand encircled her throat. Not to constrict, but to anchor her, compelling her gaze to meet his. "You have no say in the matter," he stated, his voice low. "Your choices evaporated the moment you adopted my brother's name. For better, for worse, you are a Varelli. That name is a brand upon your very being. You cannot erase it. You cannot escape it. The only choice that remains is whether you embrace it or squander the remainder of your brief existence fighting it." Elena met his stare, her heart a frantic drum against his palm. "Why is my acceptance of this so important to you?" For a suspended moment, Marcus simply watched her. His thumb traced her jawline, a disarmingly gentle gesture that was a stark contradiction to his unyielding hold. Then he let go, creating distance. "Eat. Restore your strength. We will determine the next move at dawn." He departed without further comment, the click of the lock resonating in the void. Elena remained, one hand at her neck, where the phantom pressure of his touch lingered. Her thoughts were a maelstrom, replaying the devastating truths about her father, about Adrian, and the foundational lie of her presence here. She had entered the Varelli dynasty believing it was her deliverance. But deliverance was never part of the equation. There were merely concentric circles of confinement tightening around her. And Marcus, the scarred, formidable Marcus, who regarded her as both a liability and a prize, possessed the key to every single one. Elena drew the tray toward her and made herself consume the food. This was not about appeasing hunger. It was about forging the strength required for the next circle of hell. To endure in this brutal ecosystem, she had to shed the persona of the helpless widow. She had to evolve. 3 excruciating days elapsed before Marcus reappeared. 3 days of stoic guards delivering meals, their gazes averted. 3 days of studying the same 4 walls, confirming the sealed windows, and listening to the perpetual muted rhythm of patrols. 3 days of Elena wearing a path in the carpet like a creature in a cage, charting every theoretical escape only to collide with an insurmountable reality. She had even tested the door on the 2nd day. The guard outside simply guided her back inside, silent and implacable. His touch on her shoulder had weight. It was not painful, but it was utterly devoid of warmth. A cold affirmation of her new status as property, not a person. On the morning of the 4th day, the lock turned and Marcus entered. He looked as if he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were shadowed, a coarse stubble covered his jaw, and a fresh laceration marked his forehead. Yet his suit remained immaculate, his posture a study in controlled power. Whatever battle he had just fought, it had not broken him. "Get dressed," he commanded without inflection. "Select something appropriate. You have 10 minutes. Elena rose from the bed. "For what purpose?" "The purpose is my command." That fails to be an answer. Marcus's eyes sharpened. "You require answers? Very well. Adrian's funeral is in 2 hours. Your presence is required. My father wishes to see the grieving widow perform her role at the graveside. Therefore, you will choose a black dress, you will remain silent, and you will follow my instructions to the letter. Is that understood?" The information struck her with the force of a physical blow. Adrian's funeral. Of course. So consumed by the drama of her own incarceration, she had nearly forgotten his death. Nearly forgotten that only 4 days prior she had held him as his life drained away on a polished ballroom floor. A wave of shame washed over her. "I have nothing suitable to wear," she said, her voice subdued. Marcus simply gestured to the wardrobe. "Re-evaluate." Elena pulled the closet doors open. Beyond Marcus's own clothing now hung a curated selection of women's attire, predominantly somber dresses and funereal wear. Someone had entered her room as she slept. The realization made her skin crawl. She selected the most unassuming garment she could find, a black, long-sleeved dress with a high collar. It was designed for anonymity, for blending into the shadows. Today was an exercise in being a specter, not a spectacle. 8 minutes. Marcus's voice intruded from behind. Elena turned. "May I have some privacy?" "No. I beg your pardon. I have no confidence you won't attempt something foolish. Change here or not at all. The choice is yours." A flush of heat rose in Elena's face. "You cannot be serious." Marcus merely folded his arms, leaning against the wall with an air of profound indifference. 7 minutes. The absolute tyrant. Elena seized the dress and shut the bathroom door with more force than was necessary. She changed with hurried movements, her fingers now trembling with rage rather than fear. When she came out, Marcus was in the exact same position, utterly unmoved. "Footwear is by the door," he stated. "We are leaving." The shoes were plain black pumps that fit well enough. Elena put them on and trailed Marcus from the room, inhaling her first breath of uncirculated air in 4 days. The corridor beyond was as stark and clinical as she recalled. cream walls, expensive art that evoked no feeling, and a dense carpet that smothered all sound. They passed other closed doors. Muffled conversations bled from beneath a few, but the words were indecipherable. The Varelli estate was a sprawling, self-contained world. She had only glimpsed a fraction of it on her wedding day. Wedding day. The words were now cinders in her mouth. Marcus escorted her down a grand staircase to a foyer that opened onto a circular drive. A convoy of black vehicles stood waiting, a pre-made funeral procession. Men in dark suits lingered, their quiet conversations and cigarettes ceasing the instant Marcus emerged. Their gazes shifted to Elena, a uniform blend of curiosity and disdain. She merely raised her chin and continued forward. Marcus held open the door of a polished black sedan with tinted windows. Once she was inside, Elena shifted across the leather seat. Marcus entered after her, maintaining a calculated and deliberate space between them. The driver entered silently, and the car pulled away from the compound. They journeyed through the city in a dense, charged silence. Elena watched the urban landscape blur past, observing people on the sidewalks inhabiting their ordinary lives, oblivious to the fact she was captive in a moving cell. A desperate impulse to strike the glass and scream for rescue surged within her. But to what end? No one intervenes for women like her. No one is foolish enough to challenge the Varellis. "Where is the service being held?" she asked, primarily to rupture the suffocating quiet. "The family mausoleum, roughly 20 minutes beyond the city." Marcus did not look at her as he spoke. His attention was fixed at the world outside, his jawline tense. "Will many people be there?" "A sufficient number." "And if I am asked questions, what is my response?" "Silence. You will not speak unless I grant you leave." Marcus finally turned, his dark eyes like polished obsidian. "You will stand where I place you. You will weep if you can summon the tears, but you will not draw attention. That is all." "But as his wife, they will expect precisely what I instruct them to expect." His voice lowered into a subtle threat. "You seem to have forgotten your circumstances, Elena. Allow me to clarify them for you. You are not a bereaved widow with agency. You are a complication I am managing until I determine your ultimate disposition. You continue to draw breath only because your death would present a greater inconvenience than your life. Do not compel me to reassess that calculus." A knot tightened in Elena's throat. "Are you making a threat against my life?" "I am presenting you with facts." Marcus turned his gaze back to the window. Adrian's removal created a power vacuum. Rival families are now circling, probing for any sign of weakness. My father's age is a liability, placing the burden of holding our empire together squarely on me. I lack the time for your emotional displays. So you will perform your part today, and perhaps your prison will remain a room and not a 6-foot plot of earth. The remainder of the journey unfolded in a heavy, fragile silence. The family cemetery occupied a hill that surveyed the city, enclosed by iron and stone. They arrived at a private necropolis, a place where immense wealth purchases eternal separation from the common man. The narrow access road was already choked with luxury vehicles. Marcus exited first, performing the part of the gentleman as he opened Elena's door. She accepted his hand, knowing a refusal would only create an unwelcome scene. His grip tightened on hers, a deliberate message reinforcing the hierarchy of their situation. The assembled mourners turned as one to witness their arrival. Elena saw faces from her wedding, Public officials, business associates, men who likely toasted Adrian's demise in private. The others were unknown, their gazes fixed upon Elena as if she were a fascinating catastrophe. An open grave awaited, a dark invitation etched into the manicured lawn. A mahogany casket, its polish a vulgar display of wealth, rested upon brass stands. The air was thick with the scent of white flowers, a perfume so cloying it turned Elena's stomach. Marcus guided her to the front row, his hand a firm, proprietary weight on her back. In the central chair sat an old man, his silver hair a perfect grief-defying sculpture. Elena recognized him from photographs. Vincent Varley, the architect of a violent empire. His pale eyes traveled from Marcus to her as they approached. "She is here, as you requested," Marcus announced. Vincent's gaze then settled on Elena, an invasive, calculating stare. "You are more diminutive than I pictured." To such a statement, what response is possible? Elena offered none. "Sit." Vincent gestured to the seat beside him. She complied. Marcus stood behind, his posture less like kin and more like a warden. The service began, a priest reciting hollow platitudes, from ash to ash, from dust to dust, the standard liturgy for sanitizing a brutal hit. Elena heard nothing, her focus fixed on the coffin, struggling to connect it to Adrian, the man who had promised her safety and was now merely an object. She understood that tears were expected, part of the performance. It was the role of the widow, yet her eyes remained arid. Reality felt blurred and remote, as if she were a spectator in a drama that was supposedly her own. Vincent leaned closer, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Adrian spoke highly of you." Elena blinked. "Sir?" "My son. He claimed you possessed a hidden resilience, that you had weathered storms which would break others." Vincent's expression was an unreadable mask. Was he correct? "I cannot say." "You will," he countered, his attention returning to the priest. The ceremony concluded. Guests shuffled past the casket, offering Vincent their empty, rehearsed sympathies. Elena watched these predators in tailored suits, wondering how many had wished for Adrian's end. As the coffin began its descent, Marcus's hand settled on her shoulder. "Stand." Elena rose to her feet. The casket disappeared into the earth, and she waited for the prescribed emotional impact. Sorrow, rage, anything. Instead, she felt only a vast, echoing emptiness where her heart had been. A white rose was thrust into her hand. The symbolism was obvious. Purity, grief, the facade she was meant to uphold. Elena let it fall onto the coffin without sentiment and turned away. The wake, naturally, was at the estate. The ballroom where Adrian died was now immaculate, all evidence of the violence scrubbed from existence. Elena wondered if they had burned her blood-stained wedding dress, or if it remained somewhere in the house. Marcus was her shadow, as attendees murmured disingenuous condolences. Most bypassed Elena entirely, addressing Vincent or Marcus as if she were part of the decor. The few who acknowledged her did so with frigid nods. "Mrs. Varelli." A man in a gray suit materialized beside her, his smile composed of sharp angles. "My sincere sympathies for your loss." "Thank you," Elena replied automatically. "Robert Chen," he said. "I was a business partner of your late husband. A profound tragedy." "Indeed." "You must be utterly devastated." His eyes accused her of falsehood. "If there is any way I can be of service." Before she could form a reply, Marcus was at her elbow. "Mr. Chen, I was not aware your name was on the list." The temperature around them dropped. Chen's smile never wavered. I came to pay my respects." "How thoughtful." Marcus's hand closed on Elena's waist in a clear gesture of ownership. "But my sister-in-law is overwrought. I am certain you understand." "Of course." Chen's gaze shifted between them, his mind visibly calculating. "We will speak again, Mrs. Varley." He then melted back into the crowd. "Who was that?" Elena asked. "Someone who desires what is not his," Marcus answered, leading her away. "Do not engage with him again." "I had no intention of it." "Your intentions are irrelevant. Avoid him." Marcus's jaw was granite, his grip still locked on her waist. "In fact, you will speak to no one without my presence." "For how long?" "Indefinitely, until I deem otherwise." Elena pulled away from his grasp. "I am not some possession to be managed. No, you are a widow at a funeral, which makes you a prize for every predator in this room who sees an opportunity." Marcus seized her wrist before she could retreat. "I understand your rage. I know you wish to resist me because it provides the illusion of control. But I am the only thing standing between you and 100 different ways to perish. Therefore, you will put aside your pride, you will remain by my side, and you will not get us both eliminated." His hold was not painful, but it was absolute. Elena looked into his eyes and saw a flicker behind the stoic facade, perhaps genuine concern, perhaps cold pragmatism. With Marcus, it was impossible to know. "Fine," she managed to say. He released her wrist but maintained his proximity. 2 more hours, then this charade is concluded." Time crawled forward. Elena remained tethered to Marcus, a silent recipient of an endless procession of condolences. She performed the role of the shattered widow with a practiced smile and timely nods. All the while she observed. She saw Marcus assess every person who approached, saw the subtle tension in his frame whenever anyone lingered too long. She watched Vincent preside over the room, accepting sympathies as a monarch collects tribute. She noted the guards at each exit, their hands resting near concealed weapons. This was no wake, it was a theater of war staged in mourning attire. When Marcus finally escorted her to the car, Elena's face was sore from the performance of grief and her feet throbbed. The moment the door closed, she shed her heels and shut her eyes. "You performed your role convincingly," Marcus observed as the estate receded. Elena's eyes opened to find him studying her. "I stood quietly. It is not a difficult task. You would be surprised how many fail at even that." He loosened his tie, the first sign of ease all day. "My father was impressed." "Should I be flattered?" "You should be prudent." Marcus settled into the leather seat. "Vincent is not a man who is easily impressed. His decision to address you was significant." "He asked if Adrian's assessment of me was accurate. What did that mean?" Marcus paused for a long moment. "Adrian believed you could adapt, that you had a resilience that was not immediately apparent. My father wished to verify this for himself." "And?" "He saw someone who did not break under pressure. Someone with the capacity for survival in this world." Marcus's gaze held hers. "Whether that proves to be a gift or a curse is yet to be seen." A heavy silence descended. Elena watched the city lights smear across the window. Her thoughts a vortex of the day's events. The funeral, the wake, the circling predators with their false smiles and palpable menace. She had navigated the day, but just barely. How many more such days could she possibly endure? Back at the estate, Marcus led her to her room, her cell, and she heard his key turn. Elena tensed, expecting him to push her in and depart. Instead, he entered with her, closing the door behind them. Her heart began to pound against her ribs. "What are you doing? We need to talk." Marcus moved to the window, tested the lock, then swept his eyes over the room as if searching for listening devices. "Sit down. I have been sitting all day." "Elena." Her name was a sharp order. "Sit." The command was quiet but absolute. She obeyed, perching on the edge of the bed, her fingers twisting together. Marcus paced, a caged animal, a darkness in his eyes she had never witnessed. "The wedding," he began, then halted. "It was not a random act. You said they were business rivals." "They were," he conceded, "but they had an informant. They knew the schedule, the security patterns, Adrian's exact location." His hands balled into fists. The assassination was too precise. A chilling realization dawned on Elena. "You are saying someone from the inside was involved?" "Yes." "Who?" "That," he said, stopping to face her, "is what I require you to determine. I need everything Adrian ever told you. Every single word. His dealings, his associates, his ambitions." "I barely knew him. We were betrothed for 2 months, much of which he spent away. We did not engage in profound conversations." "Then provide me with what you possess," Marcus insisted, pulling a chair from the desk and straddling it. "Begin at the start." The memory was a raw wound she did not wish to examine, but his gaze was unyielding. "He came to the diner where I was a waitress. He sat in my section 3 days straight before he said a word." "And what did he say?" "He asked if I was aware of who he was. I told him no. I believe he found that appealing." Elena recalled the moment with perfect, painful clarity. She had detected a profound loneliness in Adrian, something his fine suits and easy smile failed to conceal. He revealed his name and invited her out. She refused him, assuming he was just another wealthy man seeking a temporary diversion. Yet the next day, he returned with flowers and asked again. "And you acquiesced?" "Not immediately," she retorted, "but he possessed a surprising gentleness, and he was persistent. He never made me feel cornered." A knot tightened in Elena's throat. "I finally agreed to a single dinner. That led to another. After our third, he revealed the truth about his family." Marcus's face was unreadable. "And your reaction?" "I tried to leave. I told him I wanted no part of that world." A bitter laugh escaped Elena. "He claimed he understood, that he also sought an exit. He spoke of building a life free of entanglement." "And his vision for that was?" "Legitimate ventures, property development, tech investment, enterprises that didn't operate in the shadows," she gestured vaguely. "Crime," Marcus stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "Precisely. And you believed him." "I had to believe him." Elena's eyes met his with raw intensity. "My father was dead. His killers were now my hunters. I was utterly alone. When Adrian offered security through marriage, I seized it. The alternative was a grave in some forgotten alley." A subtle shift occurred in Marcus's expression, perhaps empathy, or merely the recognition of pure, unadulterated desperation. "Did Adrian speak of any pressures? Anyone threatening him?" Elena delved into the sparse archive of their conversations. "No, but his work was an impenetrable fortress. He walled that life off completely." "Consider the week leading up to the wedding. Was anything amiss?" "He was incredibly tense. I dismissed it as prenuptial anxiety, but—" A memory surfaced for Elena. The night before, he entered my room, insisting he had something vital to tell me. Marcus leaned in, his focus absolute. And what was it? He never finished. A call came, and he had to leave abruptly. He swore we would speak after the ceremony. Her voice fell to a near whisper. We never had that moment. Marcus sprang to his feet, resuming his restless pacing. Someone knew that attack was imminent. They either remained silent or gave him a warning he chose to disregard. Why would he ignore such a warning? To validate his own philosophy, Marcus retorted, his tone laced with a history of conflict. Adrian genuinely believed in absolution that dialogue could supersede violence. He envisioned transforming the entire family into a legitimate corporate entity. That seems noble. It seems naive, Marcus countered, stopping to stare out the window. This world does not compensate nobility. It compensates strength, terror, and the will to do what others will not. Adrian understood the codes of our world, but opted to hope for something better. That hope is what led to his demise. A profound silence descended, heavy with the sorrow Marcus concealed and the fury he struggled to contain. I knew him only briefly, Elena offered softly, but he treated me with kindness. Surely that has value. It has no value to a man in a casket. His reflection was a faint apparition in the glass. Kindness is a luxury we cannot afford. Then what can you afford? He turned, and his gaze was so intense it stole her breath. Survival, dominance, and ensuring my brother's murderers have little time to savor their victory. You intend to find them all. I intend to dismantle their entire existence and salt the earth where it once stood. His voice was so placid it was unnerving, turning the threat into an undeniable prophecy. Anyone who abetted them, who knew and stayed silent, who gained from Adrian's death, they will all be consumed by the fire. Elena should have been repulsed by such cold-blooded resolve. Instead, a dark part of her felt a grim satisfaction that a debt would finally be paid. How long will this crusade take? She inquired. However long is necessary. Marcus moved toward the door. Until it's done, you remain here. You stay unseen, and you stay completely out of my path. Wait! Elena rose to her feet. You can't simply imprison me. I can. Marcus. He turned on her with a speed that made her flinch. Have you any concept of what they will do to you? The men who killed Adrian? The predators circling his territory, even our own associates who view you as an unresolved issue. His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. They will exploit you, Elena. They will shatter you for information, barter you like a possession, or execute you merely to convey a message. The sole reason you are alive is because I have you somewhere beyond their reach. So I am your captive, for my own protection. Correct. That is not life. It is merely a slower form of death. Marcus's jaw tightened. Would you prefer the faster one? The menace hung between them, sharp as a blade. Elena held his gaze, refusing to yield. I would prefer a voice in my own fate, she declared, her tone quiet but unyielding. For a long, strained moment, Marcus merely stared. Then he walked the door. You no longer have a voice. The sooner you accept that, the less difficult this will be. He departed, and the lock's click echoed like a cell door, sealing her in. Elena was left alone, her hands trembling with impotent rage. All day she had performed the role of grieving widow, standing beside Marcus and Vincent as adversaries offered hollow sympathies. But it was not grief that was crushing her. It was the crushing reality of this gilded cage, the realization she had merely exchanged one death sentence for a different one. She would not accept this. She could not simply languish in this chamber, allowing Marcus to dictate her existence. Elena moved to the window, her hand against the cool pane. Outside, the estate was enveloped in blackness. Freedom was just there, beyond the sealed windows, the armed patrols, and the man who now commanded her life. But it was attainable. She only had to devise a way to seize it. The next morning, a guard brought her breakfast, the tray lined with the newspaper. Elena nearly discarded it. Why should the outside world concern her now? But desperate for a distraction, she began to read. The headline sent a chill through her. Varley wedding tragedy claims 12 lives. Rival organization implicated. Beneath the headline was an image of the estate, swarming with emergency personnel and police vehicles. A smaller inset photo depicted Adrian at a charity gala, smiling as if he were without a care. Elena read the article through twice. It was a tapestry of speculation and cautious phrasing. An official investigation was underway. There were no arrests. The Varley family offered no comment. But then a single line, buried deep within the text, made her inhale sharply. Sources hint the assault was facilitated from within, raising concerns about loyalty inside the syndicate. So Marcus's fears were not unfounded. A betrayer was among them, and this individual remained at large, a volatile and hidden threat. Elena lowered the paper, her gaze fixed on the locked door. Marcus was out pursuing monsters while she was being sheltered like a porcelain doll. But what if she could stop being an object? What if she could make herself so indispensable that he would have no alternative but to release her? The idea was reckless, likely suicidal, but it was infinitely better than succumbing to madness in this room. She began to observe everything, the guards' patterns, the ambient sounds that created a mental map of the house, fragments of conversations from the hall. On her 5th day of captivity, the lock turned at an unscheduled time, the middle of the afternoon. Elena glanced up from the book she was feigning to read. Marcus stood in the doorway, looking as if he had just fought his way out of hell itself. His shirt was saturated with dark, wet blood. His knuckles were raw and split. A fresh laceration was carved along his collarbone, and one eye was already swelling shut. He stumbled forward and slammed the door behind him with his foot. "Dear God," Elena whispered, "what did they do to you?" "Nothing," Marcus rasped. He managed 3 steps before his legs gave out, and he collided heavily with the dresser. Without hesitation, Elena was across the room, steadying his arm to prevent a total collapse. "He needs a hospital. No hospitals." He shrugged her off, attempting to stand, then swayed. "Just give me a moment. You're going to need sutures. You're losing far too much blood." "I said I am fine." "You are the antithesis of fine." Elena grabbed a clean shirt from a drawer and pressed it hard against the gash on his collarbone. "Hold this." Marcus complied, his hand briefly touching hers before she withdrew. His skin felt feverish. How much blood was he down? "Where is the first aid kit?" Elena asked. "Bathroom beneath the sink." She located it instantly. Its comprehensive contents suggested this was not the first time this room had been a makeshift infirmary. She retrieved it and returned to find Marcus slumped on the bed, his eyes shut tight. "Stay conscious," she commanded, trying. Elena knelt beside him, carefully peeling back the shirt, now stained a uniform crimson. The wound was deep and precise. A blade's work. It required a proper surgeon, but she could at least close it and stave off infection. "This will sting," she advised. "Everything does." Marcus opened one eye to observe her. "Just do it." She began to cleanse the wound with a sure hand. not flinching when he hissed in pain. The muscle beneath her fingers was like stone. His entire body a single, contained cry of agony. "You belong in an emergency room," she said quietly. "I can't. Too much exposure." His breaths were becoming shallow. "Hospitals bring police. Police bring complications. An infection could kill you. It wouldn't be the first risk I've taken." Elena began to stitch, her movements steadier than her nerves. Her father had taught her this, a skill from a past life she tried to suppress. Some things, it seemed, are never unlearned. Who did this? Her voice was even, almost clinical. Anything to keep him alert. The men who took Adrian. Marcus's voice was growing heavy. I located their hideout. They were not pleased with my visit. How many? 5, and then 4. And you just eliminated them. Most of them. Elena secured the final stitch before tending to his abraded knuckles. "You're insane." "Probably." He simply watched her, his expression an impenetrable mask. "You are quite skilled at this. My father instructed me. He said in his profession, knowing how to repair someone was a valuable asset." Elena's hands froze. "I only realized yesterday that his business was the same as yours. Would that knowledge have changed your decision?" She considered it with unflinching honesty. "No. I would have still chosen Adrian. I would have still accepted the security he promised, even knowing it came with a price. I just never imagined that price would be his own life." With his hands tended to, Elena withdrew. She issued a command, "Remove your shirt." An eyebrow was Marcus's only reply. "Your bleeding is profuse, and I must check for additional wounds," she explained, her voice devoid of emotion. "Comply, or I will permit you to bleed out." He wrestled himself free of the tattered garment, each motion a study in agony. Elena had to avert her gaze from the topography of scars crisscrossing his torso, some ancient and pale, others starkly new. It was a lifetime of violence inscribed upon his very skin. She discovered 2 more lacerations, both minor, and addressed them with efficiency. A tremor began in her hands as the adrenaline receded, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. As she concluded her work, Marcus's hand closed around her wrists. "My thanks." Elena met his stare. "You would have managed alone in my absence, indeed, but the pain would have been considerably greater." They remained in that tableau for a long moment, his palm radiating warmth against her wrist, his blood staining her skin. The chamber suddenly felt constricted, the air growing heavy. Then Marcus released her and leveraged himself upright. He succeeded this time, though his balance was precarious. "You require rest," Elena advised him. "Impossible. There are duties to perform. You can hardly remain standing. I have operated under far worse conditions." Yet he made no move toward the exit. He simply stood, observing her with the same inscrutable expression from the funeral. "What is it?" Elena asked sharply. "You could have allowed me to perish. It would have resolved your predicament." The thought had not crossed her mind. What predicament? Me. I am the reason you are confined to this place. In my absence, you could negotiate for your freedom with Vincent or another. Elena stood before him in the confined space. "You believe I would witness your death for a mere chance at escape? The majority would. I am not the majority." Something in his hardened countenance fractured. "No, you are not." He departed without another word, leaving Elena once more alone with bloody hands and a cascade of questions. Why seek her chambers in such a state? Surely he had access to medics. Yet he had stumbled into her cage, and why did a small part of her feel a sense of relief at having been able to help? Elena washed her hands as if trying to scrub away the answer itself. Marcus was absent for 3 days. Elena marked the passage of time by the delivery of meals, the shifting patterns of light, and the sound of footsteps in the corridor that were never his. She insisted to herself it was merely tedium, a search for any disruption to the monotony. But each click of the lock sent her heart racing with a feeling that resembled anticipation too closely. On the 3rd night, the sound of shattering glass jolted her from sleep. Elena sat bolt upright in bed, her heart pounding. The noise originated from the gardens below. She moved silently to the wall, listening. Voices sharp and irate. Then came gunfire, terse, brutal volleys that tore the night asunder. She had heard enough gunfights to recognize this was no drill. This was real. It was near enough that the acrid smell of gunpowder began to seep through the window. Her door was thrown open. A guard she did not recognize grasped her arm. Move. Now. What is happening? Move. He pulled her from the bed, heedless of her state of dress in only a t-shirt and underwear. His grip was bruising as he propelled her into the hallway. More armed guards rushed past them. Orders were being shouted from the lower levels. Elena's bare feet slapped against the marble as the man dragged her down an unfamiliar corridor deeper into the mansion's interior. They halted before a heavy steel door, the kind one might find on a bank vault. The guard entered a code and thrust Elena inside. Remain here. Do not open this for anyone except me or Marcus Varley. Do you understand? Elena offered a swift, silent nod. The door slammed shut, its heavy locks engaging with a sound of grim finality. She was inside a panic room. It was windowless, with reinforced walls and a single light casting severe shadows. A cot was present, along with a table of supplies and a wall-mounted telephone. Elena lifted the receiver. It was predictably dead. More gunfire erupted, much closer now. She could hear it through the thick walls, the distinct crack of rifles, the deeper boom of shotguns, and men shouting commands and curses. The entire estate was under siege, and she was sealed in a box, utterly blind to its resolution. Time became elastic, stretching and compressing. The sounds of battle reached a crescendo, then gradually subsided. Silence descended, punctuated only by her own unsteady breathing. Elena sat on the cot and waited. An unknowable amount of time passed before the locks finally disengaged. The door swung inward to reveal Marcus, his shirt torn and spattered with blood, a rifle slung over his shoulder. "You are safe," he said. It was a declaration, not a query. Elena rose unsteadily. What happened? Chen made his move. Marcus's voice was flat with fatigue. He gambled that he could exploit the chaos following Adrian's death. He sent his forces to seize the estate. Were they successful? They are dead, all of them. He stepped aside. Let us go. This room is secure, but I prefer you where I can see you. Elena followed him through corridors where bodies were sprawled on the floor. Chen's men, she presumed, their blood saturating the expensive carpets. She stepped over them, her mind too numb to fully register the carnage. Marcus led her to a different room, far larger than her cell. It was an office furnished with a large desk, towering bookshelves, and leather armchairs. An entire wall of bulletproof glass overlooked grounds where fires were still smoldering. "Whose office is this?" Elena inquired. "Mine." Marcus secured the door and leaned the rifle against the wall. "Sit down before you collapse." She hadn't realized she was swaying. Elena sank into a leather chair as her legs gave out. What were the casualties? 12 of his, 3 of ours. Marcus moved to a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of an amber liquid. He pressed one into Elena's hand. Drink. She obeyed, the whiskey igniting a trail of fire down her throat. Is it over? For tonight. Marcus drained his glass and poured another. Chen is dead. I delivered the bullet to his skull myself, but he will not be the last. Adrian's death left us exposed, a fact the entire world now knows. How long can you maintain this fight? For as long as is necessary. But his voice was weary, containing a profound exhaustion that tonight's battle alone could not explain. He stood by the windows, observing the distant flames, his shoulders rigid with tension. Elena studied him in the dim light. Blood and soot stained his face. His knuckles were raw, and he favored the side where her stitches were likely strained to their limit. You need a doctor, she said. Later. Marcus, I said. Later. He turned from the window, and the expression in his eyes silenced her. It was not anger. It was something raw and desperate. I need to think. I must know who is next, how to secure our position, where the next assault will originate. You need to sleep. I will sleep when I am dead. A sharp, brittle laugh escaped him, a sound suggesting he could not sustain this pace for long. Elena placed her glass on the table. Sit down. Just sit. She employed the same authoritative tone he had used with her countless times, and was surprised when he complied, collapsing into the opposing chair as if his supports had been severed. This close, she could see the brutal toll the last week had exacted. The dark circles beneath his eyes were nearly bruises. His face was leaner, honed to a razor's edge. He was a man operating on nothing but fury and will. When did you last eat? Elena asked softly. Marcus seemed to have to search for the answer. Yesterday, I believe. And sleep? A few hours, intermittently. You cannot survive this way. I have no other choice. His voice was a fractured thing. Every second I am not working is another second I afford our enemies to plot their next move. Every moment of rest is another invitation for a knife in my back. And if you collapse from the strain, what happens then? Who prevents this entire world from imploding? Marcus buried his face in his hands. You have no comprehension of how any of this functions. Then help me to understand. He met her gaze for a long moment, and she witnessed something resolve in his eyes, a decision made. This family is sustained by 2 principles, fear and respect in equal measure. My father took 40 years to build that. Adrian was to be the future, the polished public face to grant us legitimacy, while I managed the unsavory affairs. His absence created a vacuum. Every rival organization, every ambitious underboss, every upstart with a firearm can sense it. You must now project the strength to fill that void. And I must prove that I am feared to such a degree that no one would dare make an attempt. Marcus slumped in his chair. It means I cannot afford a single moment of perceived weakness. I must become the very monster they whisper stories about. Elena recalled the bodies in the corridor, the blood on his hands, the cold manner in which he spoke of killing Chen. You are not a monster. You have no idea of what I am capable. I know that you came to my room when you were wounded, not to your own men. Further, she highlighted his inconsistency, noting he could have eliminated her long ago but had not. She could see he was operating on empty, single-handedly holding his fracturing empire together while also mourning. She then delivered the critical point. That is not what monsters do. Marcus emitted a hollow laugh, a sound that implied her naivete, but she countered. I am a realist. Monsters do not experience guilt. You do. He challenged her, asking how she could possibly know. So she detailed the evidence: his sleeplessness, his self-destruction in service of being their shield, and his clear conflict over whether to view her as a human or a liability. She moved closer, asserting that a true monster would be indifferent. The tension in the room became palpable. For the first time, Marcus truly saw her, not as a strategic problem in his criminal equation. He murmured that Adrian had been correct about her inner fortitude. Elena responded, "It was a necessity. The weak are consumed in my world as well." When he inquired about her life before this, it was a profound departure. No one, not Adrian, nor anyone else, had ever shown such interest. They had been too preoccupied with either using her or guarding her to consider who she was before the Varelli name was imposed upon her. "Poor," she stated plainly. "My father worked to exhaustion simply to provide us with food and shelter. With her mother gone, Elena's world shrank to the two of them. Her father imparted a harsh curriculum: self-defense, threat assessment, wound care, and the art of erasure. She had perceived it as paranoia, but it was in fact a grim preparation for the very life he sought to renounce." "Do you resent him for that?" Marcus queries. Elena considers the weight of the question. "On some days, yes, but the absence of him is a greater pain. He was a fractured man, trying to secure her future through the only means he understood: servitude to the Varellis. He did what was necessary to ensure her survival." She pauses, delivering the final incisive blow. "Precisely as you are doing now." Marcus recoils as if struck. He insists the situations are dissimilar, but she silences him. He too is forfeiting his soul for the preservation of his family. She presses the point. "In what way is that different?" He counters that this existence was his own volition, not a fate imposed upon her or Adrian. She dismisses this. "Was it not? He was born to this world, identical to you." A tempest of sorrow, fury, and something akin to remorse plays across Marcus's features. She unleashes another revelation. Adrian had once confided in her a wish to have been someone else, an individual who did more than merely sustain a dynasty founded on fear. "When did he tell you this?" Marcus demands. "During our second dinner," she replies. The wine acted as a truth serum. The memory is a sharp pang. He had said the sole redeeming quality of being a Varelli was the capacity to genuinely aid others, to perhaps introduce a measure of balance to the family's dark ledger. Marcus surges to his feet, a caged animal pacing to the window. He was an idealist. It led to his death. Elena retorts. Or a betrayer ended his life and his ideals were irrelevant to the act. But Marcus is adamant, arguing his brother's romanticism made him vulnerable, causing him to trust the wrong individuals and ignore a rising threat until it was too late. Marcus confronts his own tormented reflection in the darkened glass. He posits that Adrian's desire to see benevolence in everyone is precisely what led to his demise. And you perceive threats in every shadow, because that is where they reside. He returns fire. He recites his grim accomplishments, steering the family through 3 power struggles, 2 federal investigations, and innumerable assassination attempts. Adrian's path culminated in a casket. My path ensures our people continue to breathe. It also condemns you to solitude, to exhaustion, and leaves you one catastrophe away from total collapse, she counters. That is the breaking point. In 3 strides, Marcus is upon her, pulling her from the chair. Elena shows no fear, merely meeting his punishing grip and incandescent rage. "Do you desire the truth?" His voice is a frayed live wire. "I am one disastrous day from immolating this entire kingdom. I am one moment of weakness from ending it all because this burden is too damn heavy." He is clinging to control by a thread, and the only thing preventing his descent is the knowledge that all who rely on him would fall with him. "Then allow me to help you bear it." "There is no one," he states. "I am here," the words escape her unbidden. "I am not soliciting your trust, but you should not endure this ordeal in isolation." Marcus simply stares, his grip still a vice on her shoulders, his breathing labored. "Why would you offer me aid? I have held you captive, regarded you as chattel, and given you every conceivable reason to despise me." "Because," she says, "you have also been my shield. I witnessed you mourning your brother when you pretended to feel nothing. I have seen the anguish you conceal beneath layers of armor." Elena's fingers gently trace the scar on his jaw, because I comprehend the sensation of drowning. For an instant, Marcus is paralyzed, her hand on his face, his eyes searching hers for the familiar artifice and deception. And then some internal dam within him simply shatters. His kiss is not tender, it is a desperate, violent collision of mouths. His hands tangle in her hair, anchoring her to him as if terrified she might dematerialize. And Elena should resist him, she should feel revulsion, but instead, she is returning the kiss with an identical, frantic desperation. It is a beautiful, chaotic, five-alarm conflagration of a mistake. This is the brother of her deceased husband, her captor, a man whose hands are stained with blood. But in that moment, such distinctions are meaningless. All she craves is contact, a tangible confirmation that she is still among the living. Marcus is the first to break away, breathing heavily, his forehead pressed to hers. "This is a transgression we cannot." "I know." Yet neither of them retreats an inch. They remain there in the darkened office as the world beyond them burns, and some fundamental element between them is irrevocably altered. "I never despised you," Marcus whispers. "At the wedding. You believed I harbored hatred for you. I did not." Elena's heart hammers against her ribs, seeking escape. "Then what was it you felt?" "I wanted you." The admission is raw, excavated from his very soul. "I was observing you for weeks before Adrian was even aware of your existence. I trailed you from that diner, telling myself it was simple surveillance, but I was fully aware of the truth. This revelation should have been horrifying. Instead, it aligns with the terrible internal logic." "Why did you not approach me then?" "Because Adrian saw you first. He laid claim to you like a trophy." Marcus's laugh is pure vitriol. "Because I knew that if I allowed myself to get close, I would be compelled to keep you. And in our world, need is a fatal weakness. So, I relinquished you to Adrian and feigned that it was of no consequence. But it was not. No," he concedes. "I stood there, watching him marry you, and I entertained thoughts of killing him to assume his place." His grip on her hair constricts. "And then another did the deed for me, and my most shadowed wish materialized in the most horrific way imaginable." Elena pulls back to scrutinize his face. "Is that why you held me here, to maintain a distance from me?" "To ensure your safety, to prevent myself from doing this, to ascertain if you were merely an obsession or something far more perilous." He releases her, stepping back as if a chasm has suddenly opened between them. It turns out it is more perilous. What is? Marcus turns from her, his posture rigid. I have no capacity for this, for wanting you, for caring. It is all a liability. He elaborates that anyone he cares for becomes a target. Adrian is gone because an enemy understood that his death would shatter Marcus. If they ever discovered she was more than just a hostage, they would pursue her. They would force him to watch as they dismantled her, piece by piece, before ending her life merely to demonstrate their power. His voice is frayed with an absolute primal terror. I will not permit that to happen. Elena's mind is a vortex, struggling to process the tempest of his confessions. So Marcus had desired her, shadowed her, and then isolated her, all in a twisted effort to protect them both. And he had just kissed her, as if he were a man dying of thirst. So, what is the next step? She asks softly. Nothing. This will not occur again. Marcus dons his mask of ice once more. You will return to your room. I will return to my work. We will erase the memory of this event. As simple as that? Yes, as simple as that. Elena lets out a sharp, acrid laugh. Do you truly believe you can just extinguish this? Pretend it holds no reality? I have been pretending since the moment I first saw you, he says with cold finality. I am capable of continuing. He moves toward the door. Let us go. I am escorting you back. But Elena remains motionless. And what if I no longer wish to pretend? Marcus's hand stills on the doorknob. Pretend what? That I was unmoved when you kissed me? That you are not the first person in months to have perceived me as a human being? Do not make this more difficult than it needs to be, he says, his gaze averted. You believe you want this, but you are mistaken. I am not Adrian. I do not possess his compassion. I am the monster who keeps the other monsters at bay. And proximity to me will only result in your ruin. I am already ruined, she states. Your brother died in my arms. I am a captive in this house. My former life is gone. What more could you possibly seize from me? Your hope. Marcus finally turned to her, the torment in his eyes a physical blow. That is what I will take, the part of you that still entertains the notion of a happy ending. I will corrupt it, twist it, until you are as fractured and dark as I am. And you will despise me for it. You cannot know that. Oh, but I do. It is my nature. It is the fundamental law of this life. He threw the door wide. Now let us go before I reconsider. Elena walked to the threshold, but paused at its edge. You are mistaken. About what? About your belief that you are a monster. True monsters do not shield people from themselves. She vanished down the corridor before a reply could form on his lips. Marcus pursued, the space between them a gulf of unspoken tension, the air heavy with the fallout of their words. He unlocked her door, but hesitated at the threshold, a sentry rendered speechless. Try to rest, she urged softly. I will, he conceded. Her subsequent gratitude for his protection caught him off guard. A flicker of disbelief crossed his features. He had anticipated fury, not thanks. He dismisses it as duty. She immediately refutes this, distinguishing his obligation to the Empire from his actions tonight. Preserving my life was a choice you made, she asserted, meeting his gaze without flinching. And for that choice, I am grateful. A single, sharp nod was his only reply before the door closed between them. The sound of the lock was a familiar note of isolation, yet the confinement felt altered. Her gilded cage seemed to expand, the quiet, less oppressive, born from a revelation. She was not the sole prisoner. Marcus, too, was ensnared, perhaps more deeply shackled by fealty to an empire that consumed all and offered nothing in return. Reclining on the bed, her gaze unfocused, she felt the phantom pressure of his touch and replayed his words. The terror she should have felt at the brutality, his dark fixation, and their collision of destinies was strangely muted. Yet all she experienced was a strange, electric anticipation for what might unfold. The following morning brought a hard reset. A different guard unlocked her door. This was not the typical silent delivery of a meal, but a formal summons. Mr. Vincent Varley requires your presence in his office. A cold dread settled in Elena's stomach. Immediately? Immediately. She donned the most nondescript clothing she possessed and followed the guard. It was her first opportunity to witness the aftermath of the attack in daylight. Bullet holes pockmarked the walls. Faint bloodstains defied the most vigorous scrubbing of the marble floors. The lustrous veneer of the Varley Empire was beginning to fracture. Vincent's office was situated in the most ancient wing of the mansion, a chamber of dark wood, old leather, and the lingering aroma of costly cigars. The patriarch occupied his throne behind a colossal desk, with Marcus positioned beside him, a sentinel of stone. Marcus offered no recognition, his expression an impenetrable void that caused Elena's nascent hopes to collapse. They were reverting to the performance. "Sit, Elena!" Vincent's voice was a low rumble devoid of malice. She took the seat opposite him, her hands clenched to still their trembling. For a long moment, Vincent merely observed her, his aged eyes possessing the sharpness of blades. "My son informs me you conducted yourself with considerable composure last night. You adhered to protocol and did not succumb to panic." "I was petrified," Elena confessed, "but you did not permit fear to command you." "That is the crucial distinction." He settled back into his chair. "You have been under our roof for nearly 2 weeks. Sufficient time to comprehend our methods. Sufficient time to reach a decision." "What sort of decision?" "Whether you represent an asset to this family or a complication we must eliminate." Vincent's delivery was remarkably casual, as if discussing meteorology rather than her possible demise. "Marcus contends you are valuable, that your tie to Adrian constitutes an advantage. Others perceive you as a liability who will precipitate our downfall." Elena's throat constricted. "What is your assessment?" "I believe you possess a cunning far greater than you reveal. I believe you have been observing, learning the mechanisms of survival in a world that, by all rights, should have already consumed you." Vincent advanced a folder in her direction. "Which is why the choice is entirely yours." Elena opened it, her hands unsteady. It contained a collection of legal instruments and financial statements, a lexicon she scarcely grasped. "Adrian bequeathed you everything," Vincent clarified. "His stake in our enterprises, his properties, his total net worth. In the eyes of the law, you are now one of the wealthiest widows in the country." Elena's gaze snapped upward. "I don't understand." "It is quite elementary. You can accept this fortune and vanish. We will furnish you with a new identity, a secure location, and you will never be contacted by us again." Vincent's expression remained a mask. "Alternatively, you can remain. Accept this inheritance, assume your position in this family, and assist us in rectifying the chaos Adrian's death has wrought." "Why would you wish for me to stay?" "Because you are still Adrian's widow. That title carries weight with the traditionalist families, our confederates. They honor mourning. They honor the sacrament of marriage even beyond death. Vincent's eyes shifted to Marcus, then returned to her. And because my son believes you are more than capable of embodying the role of the grieving wife. Elena's heart pounded against her ribs. Marcus maintained his resolute silence, jaw clenched, hands clasped behind him. Was this his strategy or his father's? If I were to stay, Elena began, her words measured, what would my function be? It signifies your integration into the operational machinery of this organization. You will learn the commerce, act as a family representative, and help manage our legitimate ventures. It means you cease being a captive and become a contributor. Vincent's gaze intensified. But it also means you are irrevocably bound to us. No reconsiderations, no fleeing when circumstances become dire. Once you are family, it is for life. There are no exit clauses. Elena stared at the documents. Emancipation was right there, printed and notarized. Wealth, security, a new existence removed from this cycle of violence and shadows. But freedom for what purpose? To return to a life of perpetual vigilance. She had no one, no allies, no safety net. The shield Adrian had provided was the sole reason she was still breathing. And if she were honest, a part of her felt no compulsion to leave, no compulsion to sever the intense, unorthodox bond she had forged with Marcus. No compulsion to relinquish the first environment where she felt she could wield actual power rather than exist as a pawn. How much time do I have? She inquired. 2 hours. Vincent rose, signaling the meeting's conclusion. Consider it carefully, Elena. This is a choice that cannot be rescinded. The guard escorted her back to her room, where Elena simply gazed at the papers, her mind a maelstrom of possibilities. She could escape, take the fortune, and dissolve into a quiet, protected life. Or she could stay, claim a seat in this brutal kingdom, and align herself with the man who acknowledged his own darkness while championing his brother's honor. Liberty or dominion, security or meaning, retreat or engagement. By the time Marcus entered her room that evening, her decision was solidified. He bypassed the formality of knocking, using his key as if by right. Elena was seated on the bed, the documents arranged before her, watching as he secured the door. Marcus appeared even more ravaged than the night before. His eyes were bloodshot, his frame rigid with a pain he sought to conceal. He wore fresh clothes, yet a trace of blood was visible beneath a fingernail. Have you made your decision? He asked, his voice toneless. Elena gathered the papers and extended them. I'm staying. Marcus scowled at the documents as if they were venomous. You should take the money and go. I am finished with going. Elena, I am staying, she reiterated, her voice gaining strength. I am claiming Adrian's inheritance and my place within this family. I am finished with being confined and treated as a liability. Marcus seized the papers, tossing them onto the dresser. Do you comprehend the implications? This is not a contract you can simply void when it becomes difficult. You are swearing your very life to this family. I did that on the day I married Adrian. Elena rose to meet his gaze directly. The only distinction now is that I am choosing this fate. You're choosing to affix a target to your own back. You're choosing a life where every morning carries the possibility of a bullet. I am choosing strength over vulnerability. She stepped closer. Last night, you asked what more you could take from me. Now I am taking something for myself. Control, agency, the authority to determine my own end rather than allowing other men to dictate it. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, perhaps respect or merely profound apprehension. You believe this prison offers more control than escape ever could. Out there, I am prey, alone and exposed. In here, I am a Virelli. The name is a weapon I intend to master. Or one that will see you killed. Everything is a death sentence, eventually. Elena held his stare. This way, at least, I perish fighting, not hiding. Marcus fell silent, his eyes scrutinizing her face for any sign of fragility, deceit, or fracture. You are unequivocally certain of this? Then you must learn the code. He crossed the window, creating distance as if her proximity disrupted his concentration. You are no longer Adrian's widow. You are an asset of this family that places you under Vincent, under me, under our entire command hierarchy. You will execute every order the instant it is issued. You will never challenge a directive in the presence of others. You will not make decisions impacting this family without authorization. And you will never, under any circumstances, betray us, because if you do, I will terminate you myself. That vow should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the most honest statement he had made all day. I understand, Alana said. You will be assigned duties in the legitimate businesses. Adrian was developing a real estate portfolio. You will assume control of it. Learn the properties, the tenants, the revenue streams. Maintain a flawless facade while managing the sordid reality beneath. The corner of Marcus's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Precisely. And my residence? You will be relocated to the family compound. A proper room, not a holding cell, but it will be under guard. You are prohibited from leaving without clearance and an escort until this situation subsides. So I remain a prisoner, merely in a more opulent cage. Consider it protective custody, Marcus retorted, turning from the window. There is another matter, the kiss. It was an error. You said it was complicated. He raked a hand over his face. I was sincere about observing you, about wanting you. That impulse doesn't simply vanish because it is inconvenient. Elena's heart began to pound. What are you attempting to convey? I'm conveying the need for boundaries. You are family now, which renders this even more forbidden than it already was. Vincent can never know, no one can. If they detect a bond between us, you become a vulnerability they can exploit against me. Therefore, we behave as if it never occurred. We proceed as if nothing is transpiring. Marcus's gaze was incendiary. Because it cannot. Not while you are under my protection. Not with this family on the verge of collapse. Not while every adversary we have is searching for a fissure in our defenses. Elena eliminated the space between them until mere inches remained. And when the turmoil ceases, when the enemies are neutralized, what happens then? Marcus's jaw tightened. We will address that when the time comes. That isn't a response. It is the only one I possess. His hand lifted, as if to touch her, then dropped. I can promise you nothing beyond your survival. Everything else remains indeterminate. I'm not requesting promises. Elena reached out, pressing his hand to her skin, just as she had before. I'm requesting the truth. Do you want me here? Marcus inhaled sharply. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and in his eyes, Elena witnessed the internal conflict he was waging. Duty against desire, rationale against instinct, the killer he was engineered to be against the man he was. Yes, he finally exhaled, the word a confession torn from him. I want you to stay, despite knowing I shouldn't. despite the fact that it is selfish and reckless and will likely lead to both our destructions. Elena inclined her head, brushing a kiss against his palm. Then I'm staying. Here we witness the violent paradox of a man like Marcus, as he pulls her into an embrace with a force that steals her breath, his arms a cage of his own making. For one protracted, volatile moment they exist in this fragile state, two figures caught in this machinery of an untenable world, clinging to the only tangible truth left between them. Then the mechanism retracts. He recoils, his expression a battlefield of warring impulses. Assemble your possessions. You will be relocated to your new quarters at sunrise. She queries his own plans. I have my duties. I am always on duty. He moves toward the exit, but hesitates. Elena, this alters nothing. The chasm between us remains. I understand. And indeed she did. She perceived the architecture of their prison with perfect clarity, but this perception did not numb the pain. I will expect you in the morning. He departed without a backward glance, leaving Elena to face the architecture of her decision. The new chamber was 3 times the size of her former cell, featuring windows that opened to the world and a washroom that was not a concrete tomb. Her meager collection of personal effects had been placed inside, appearing utterly insignificant against the backdrop of opulent furniture. At the doorway stood Maria, the same elder woman who had prepared her for the wedding ritual. Miss Elena, I am Maria. My purpose is to assist you. Assist me with what precisely? With whatever you require. Your wardrobe, your daily regimen, your acclimation to the customs of this household. Maria's demeanor was benevolent yet guarded. Mr. Vincent desires your comfort. The word, comfortable, almost provoked a bitter laugh from Elena. In a domain where one faction desired her demise and the other viewed her as a strategic asset in their complex game. I require clothing, she stated, dismissing the absurdity. Functional attire, not ceremonial gowns. Garments suitable for actual work. Of course, a couturier will attend to you tomorrow. Maria paused, then added, If I may be so bold, miss, it is a relief to see you liberated from that room. Mr. Adrien would have wished for you to have a measure of freedom. The mention of his name struck Elena like a physical blow. In her singular focus on surviving Marcus, she had almost allowed the memory of the man who initiated this entire ordeal to fade. You were well acquainted with him? Elena inquired. I have been in service to this family for 30 years. I observed both young men mature into their roles. A distant quality entered Maria's gaze. Mr. Adrien was the more compassionate soul. He sought the inherent good in others, even where none existed. Mr. Marcus was forged from a harder material, yet his devotion to his brother was total. He displays it in a peculiar manner. Mr. Marcus cannot manifest his emotions. He was conditioned by his father to perceive sentiment as a profound weakness. In this world, feelings are a liability. Maria drew back the heavy draperies, flooding the room with sunlight. But I have observed the way he regards you. It is the same expression he wore for things he coveted with desperation, but believed he could never possess. The air caught in Elena's throat. What is the meaning of your statement? It has no meaning, miss. Merely the idle musings of an old woman. Maria offered a small, knowing smile. The evening meal is served at 7. You are expected to join them in the great dining hall. I will return for you then. Following her departure, Elena surveyed her new enclosure. The walk-in wardrobe was a vast, empty cavern, awaiting its narrative to be written. The bathing vessel was large enough to accommodate 2. The bed was a monument, draped in silks that likely exceeded the value of her former annual income. This was the texture of her new existence, a tapestry of luxury and peril woven so tightly together, she could no longer distinguish the threads. Dinner was an exercise in silent conflict. The hall could host 30, yet only 5 settings were prepared. Vincent occupied the head of the table, with Marcus to his right and Elena to his left. 2 men she had not seen before were seated opposite them. Elena, I present James Caruso and Michael Romano. Vincent performed the introductions. They manage our financial instruments and our legitimate enterprises. The men offered her impassive expressions, their eyes conducting a swift, cold appraisal of her value, calculating whether she represented a threat or a potential instrument. Gentlemen, Elena acknowledged quietly. Attendants moved like specters around them, presenting the first course without a whisper. The silence was a palpable weight, punctuated only by the scrape of silver on porcelain. At last, Vincent cleared his throat. Elena has consented to claim her inheritance by assuming management of Adrian's real estate portfolio. Is that a prudent strategy? Caruso inquired, his tone flat but his eyes sharp. Considering the current volatility. It is a necessary one, Marcus interjected before Vincent could respond. We require stability, particularly in our public-facing ventures. Alana is Adrian's sole legatee. The assets are legally hers. It is preferable she oversees them rather than allowing them to decay. And what is her experience in the field of property development? Romano's question bordered on insubordination. Elena placed her fork down with deliberation. None, which is precisely why I intend to learn. I was under the impression that was the purpose of accountants and legal counsel, to advise those of us without such specialized knowledge. Romano's brow arched. A genuine smile briefly touched Vincent's lips. She makes a valid point, Vincent observed. Adrian possessed no knowledge of real estate when he began. He acquired it. So shall she. With all due respect, sir, Adrian was blood. She is blood now. Marcus sliced through the conversation, his voice cold enough to lower the room's temperature. She is a Varelli. This discussion is concluded. Romano sealed his lips, but his resentment was visible. The dinner proceeded with talk of business that Elena could not yet comprehend. She simply listened, attempting to assemble the fragments of the life Adrian had lived. When the meal was finished, Marcus halted her with a hand on her arm. My office, in 10 minutes. He had vanished before she could form a reply. Elena navigated her way to his study, the same space where he had first claimed her lips, where the city burned beyond the glass as they detonated the space between them. The room felt altered now, less a theater of war and more a center of operations. Marcus was waiting, his desk a landscape of documents, a glass of whiskey at hand. He did not look up. Secure the door! Elena complied, and the soft click of the latch felt like a final seal. Marcus finally raised his eyes to hers. Caruso and Romano do not trust you. They perceive you as an opportunist who ensnared Adrian and is now attempting to infiltrate the family. Are they mistaken about the ensnarement? Yes. And your own motive? He dismissed the question with a slight shrug. It is irrelevant. They will challenge you at every turn. They will scrutinize every decision. With every move you make, they will be watching, seeking to engineer your failure so Vincent will cast you aside. Then what is the strategy? Remain one move ahead. Be more clever. Do not allow them to dismantle you. Marcus took a sip of his liquor. and place your trust in no one, only Vincent and myself. Anyone else in this house would sell you for a pittance." Elena approached his desk. "Including yourself. To ensure the survival of this family, I would sacrifice you without hesitation." Their eyes met and held. "But it would excise a part of me, if that offers you any solace." "It does not." "No, I did not imagine it would." Marcus pushed a thick dossier across the desk. Adrian's complete portfolio, 12 properties across the city, residences, retail spaces, a hotel. The entire collection is valued at approximately $40 million. He tapped the cover. Revenue streams, expenditures, tenant ledgers. It is all contained within. You have 7 days to master its contents and present a new strategic vision to Vincent. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. 7 days. This is the family business. There are no second attempts. He poured a second glass and extended it to her. "You will require this." She accepted it, sinking into the chair opposite him. The heat of the whiskey was a welcome counterpoint to the terror constricting her chest. A $40 million dominion had been placed in her hands. She had 7 days to bring it to heel, surrounded by men anticipating her fall. And then there was Marcus, his expression an unreadable cipher. "I do not believe I am capable of this," she confessed. "You are," he countered instantly. "Otherwise you would already be gone." He leaned back, his demeanor glacial. "Fear is an indicator of intelligence. Anger is a tool. Employ them. Allow Caruso and Romano to discover the consequences of underestimating you." "How?" "By exceeding their every conception of you, outmaneuver them. Prove you are not merely Adrian's grieving widow. You are a Varelli, and that name carries weight." He paused. "And seek me out when you are cornered. I will not offer aid, but I will provide you with the unvarnished facts." She stared at the file, a death sentence with a 7-day timeline. "Demonstrate your worth or be exiled." She had endured far worse. "Very well," she breathed. "I accept. I knew you would." For a fleeting instant, his features softened. "You should depart. The hour is late, and your countdown has commenced." Elena rose but paused. "Marcus, thank you." "For what?" "For having faith in me, even if you refuse to voice it." A shadow of an unreadable emotion crossed his face. "If I did not, I would have advised Vincent to simply buy you out. Now go before I reconsider my policy of detachment." She was through the door before he could witness the impact of his admission. The subsequent 5 days were a descent into hell. Elena became a stranger to sleep, submerged in contracts and financial statements until the words dissolved into an incoherent blur. Maria delivered meals that grew cold, an endless supply of coffee that Elena consumed mechanically, and expressions of concern that Elena summarily ignored. She discovered that Adrian was far more astute than he had been given credit for. His properties were strategically positioned in districts poised for economic booms. The hotel was a veritable mint. His commercial holdings were the ideal architecture for laundering revenue, all under a veneer of legitimacy. Yet there were fissures in the foundation. A tenant in one residential building was inciting a rent strike. A commercial property was afflicted with a structural flaw that would demand a fortune to rectify. With the hotel hemorrhaging capital due to gross mismanagement, Elena was architecting a recovery. Her spreadsheets and projections were a tribute to her father's legacy, forging a potent strategy from the fiscal ruin. Marcus materialized in her room on the 6th day, his entrance unannounced, a breach of protocol. She lifted her gaze from the laptop, her eyes strained by the data. He bluntly assessed her appearance as terrible, and she returned the sentiment. Indeed, he bore the marks of exhaustion, each movement laden with pain as he fell into a chair. His command was terse. "Show me!" In response, Elena pivoted the screen, revealing her entire stratagem. Marcus absorbed the information in stoic silence, his expression a perfect void. After her presentation, the stillness in the room was immense. "So," Elena finally ventured, he began, "the apartment building. You will negotiate with the organizer, not expel them." "Correct. Their complaints about the building's condition are valid. By addressing their issues and setting a fair rent, unlike Adrian's predatory increases, I neutralize their dissent and maintain full occupancy. The initial investment averts catastrophic legal fees and vacancies." She held his stare. "It also reframes the family as something other than slumlords." Marcus considered this. A slow smile transformed his features, altering his entire demeanor. "Vincent will be very pleased with you." Relief washed over her. "Truly?" "Absolutely. It's intelligent and pragmatic. It proves you're seeing the whole board, not just the next move." He rose to his feet. "Present it precisely that way tomorrow. When Caruso challenges the expenditure, do not flinch. Hold your position. Will you be there?" "I will be present, but I will not intervene. This is your battle to win." Marcus moved toward the door, but paused. "Elena, you have genuinely surprised me. I truly did not believe you possessed this capability. You challenged me to demonstrate my value. I am. You're achieving far more." He met her eyes directly. "You are signaling that this is your domain now. Not as a widow in mourning, not as a frightened girl in a costume. You are establishing yourself as a threat, a credible one." That label, threat, should have stung. Instead, it registered as the most profound praise he could offer. The meeting the following morning was a veritable bloodbath. Caruso dissected every figure she presented. Romano relentlessly probed for weaknesses in her plan. Vincent remained a silent observer, watching the proceedings like a piece of private theater. Marcus stood against the wall, offering no support. Yet Elena refused to yield, defending each point with unassailable logic. When Caruso deemed her weak for negotiating, she fixed him with a lethal glare. "Adrian created this enterprise for long-term profitability. Exploiting tenants is not sustainable. My strategy is." The subsequent silence was absolute. Vincent's laughter shattered the quiet, a coarse sound that seemed to startle even him. "I must concede, the woman has conviction." "The figures are sound," Marcus contributed, his first words at the meeting. "Her reasoning is impeccable. I recommend we approve the plan and grant her total authority over the assets." Caruso began to protest, but a single glance from Vincent silenced him. "It is done. Elena, I expect weekly updates. Major decisions still require my approval or Marcus's, but daily operations are yours." Beneath the table, her hands trembled, but her voice was unwavering. "Thank you." The meeting concluded. As the room emptied, her eyes met Marcus's. The pride in his expression was nearly overwhelming. She had succeeded. She had defied their expectations and secured her position. Now began the more difficult challenge of maintaining it. For the subsequent 2 weeks, Elena was consumed by her work. She conferred with building managers, inspected properties, and attended tenant assemblies. The organizer, a woman named Sarah, was merely a resilient advocate for her neighbors. Elena listened, and through negotiation, they reached a compromise. The hotel posed a greater challenge. The manager was embezzling funds and had connections to a rival organization. Elena delivered her evidence to Marcus, who resolved the matter. The manager vanished. A replacement appeared. Profits soared. A new narrative began to circulate. Adrian's widow was no mere figurehead. She was a competent operator. This fact should have simplified matters, but it instead created complexity. Marcus began to withdraw. Their conversations became strictly professional, brief updates and necessary signatures. He avoided her gaze, manufacturing reasons to prevent them from being alone. Elena rationalized his behavior as a security measure, but the rationale did not numb the ache. The cold partition he was erecting felt like a profound betrayal after the bond they had formed. 3 weeks after her victory, a vehicle slowed beside her as she exited the hotel. The window descended, showing an unfamiliar face. "Mrs. Varley, my employer requests a meeting." Her security detail instantly converged on the vehicle, weapons materializing. The man merely smiled. "That is unnecessary. This is only a discussion. My employer possesses information concerning the assault on your wedding day. We believed you would be interested." Elena's heart raced. "Inform your employer to use established channels." "The established channels are compromised. That is the information." He extended a card through the window. "Tomorrow evening. The address is on it. Arrive unaccompanied if you desire the truth about who murdered Adrian." The car accelerated away before she could reply. Her security chief retrieved the card. "We must inform Mr. Marcus of this at once." But Elena's thoughts were spiraling. Information on Adrian's murderer, on the traitor within their ranks. This was either an elaborate trap or the breakthrough they desperately needed. She took the card from him. "Allow me to consider this." That evening, Marcus stormed into her room without knocking. "What in God's name were you thinking?" He threw a file onto her desk. "The security brief. A complete stranger offers you intelligence on a corner, and it doesn't occur to you to inform us?" Elena rose, her own anger flaring. "I was about to." "When?" "After attending this clandestine meeting alone and getting yourself executed." "I am not foolish enough to go alone." "But you are foolish enough to contemplate it." He was more furious than she had ever seen. "This is the precise scenario I warned you of. They present the one thing you desire, answers, and you prepare to walk directly into their snare. Or it's legitimate, someone with actual knowledge of our betrayal." Elena snatched the card from her desk. "You have uncovered nothing for weeks. This could be our opportunity." "It is not an opportunity, it is bait." Marcus tore the card from her grasp. "And you will not be taking it. You lack the authority to command me. If there are answers about Adrian's death, I will be the one to find them, not you." His jaw was set like stone. "You will not endanger your life for a stranger's hollow promise." "And why may I not? You do so every day." "That is not the same." "How?" Elena moved closer, her fury cresting. "Because you are the trained assassin? The enforcer, while I am merely the widow managing finances? Because my life is inconsequential?" The words tore from him, raw and agonized. "My death changes nothing. The organization continues. Vincent secures a replacement. The world does not halt. But if you died," he faltered at the thought, his breath catching, If I die, what occurs then? Elena pressed. The assets are transferred. The family installs a new figurehead. So tell me, Marcus. If you die, he whispered, I lose my entire world. That admission cost him a piece of his soul. And it is the very reason this meeting is impossible for you. My role is to defend you, not to pursue an offensive victory. That strategy leads to both our deaths. The fight drained out of Elena. My error. I should have informed you immediately. Marcus sagged against the wall. You require intelligence on Adrian, I understand, but this is the wrong method. Then what is the correct one? Allow me to manage it. I will have the location scouted for traps. If it is clear, we will arrange a secure encounter. He finally met her eyes, and the sheer exhaustion in them was a palpable blow. Just give me your word you will do nothing reckless. I promise. Marcus nodded and started to leave. Wait, Elena called. You are maintaining a great distance from me. His hand paused on the doorknob. My workload has been overwhelming. You are avoiding me, she countered. Since the presentation. Did I do something wrong? You have executed everything perfectly. That is the issue. Marcus turned back to her. You were meant to be a problem to be contained, a liability to be controlled. Instead, you have become essential to the mission, and everyone sees it, which enlarges the target on your back. So this is your strategy? To pretend I am invisible? I am protecting us by maintaining a professional boundary. But his gaze told an entirely different narrative, one of profound longing she felt echoed in her own core. She eliminated the space between them. And what if I am finished with this distance? Elena, what if the one thing I truly desire is the very thing that will guarantee our destruction? His self-control was disintegrating. She witnessed it in his clenched jaw, in his hands balling into fists. You are oblivious to what you are requesting. Oh, I am not. I am requesting the truth. For you to perceive me as something beyond fragile, I am asking for. And then he kissed her. This was unlike before. It was not a storm, it was a conquest. His hands rose to frame her face, his thumb a gentle caress against her skin as his lips met hers with a world-altering gravity. Elena simply dissolved into his embrace, her hands seizing his shirt, drawing him nearer. This was the profound connection she had desperately sought, the silent affirmation that she was not alone in this inferno. Marcus pulled away, their foreheads resting together. This is a fundamentally flawed concept. The absolute worst, Elena whispered. We cannot proceed. We genuinely should not, Elena. Her name on his lips was a prayer, an appeal, and a complete capitulation. She pulled him back into the kiss, and this time there was no holding back. A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. Marcus recoiled instantly, his expression hardening into the familiar cold mask he wielded as armor. He adjusted his shirt, moving toward the window as if nothing had transpired. Come in, Elena articulated, her voice unsteady. Maria entered, bearing a tray. Your supper, miss. I assumed you would prefer it in here after such a trying day. Thank you, Maria. The woman placed the tray down, her eyes shifting between them with total comprehension. Mr. Marcus, will you be staying for supper? No, I was just departing. His gaze refused to meet hers. We will address the security arrangements in the morning. He was gone, and Elena felt a powerful impulse to hurl something at the door he had just used. Maria started to arrange the food on the small table. He is resisting it with all his being, you know. Elena became perfectly still. I have no idea what you are referring to. No, of course you do not. Maria's smile was kind. But if you did, you would see that Mr. Marcus has never looked at anyone the way he looks at you. Not in all the years I have worked here. I am an old woman. I notice things. I also know when to maintain my silence. She moved toward the door. Just be prudent, miss. In this house, every glance is registered, and not all of them are friendly. The sensation of his kiss lingered on her lips. Her mind was a turbulent storm of things left unspoken. It was forbidden, a monumental risk, precisely the kind of entanglement that concluded in a body bag in their world. And yet, it was authentic. The bond they shared was the only genuine element in a life of strategy and falsehoods. Elena merely toyed with her food, pondering how to endure wanting the one thing she could never attain. The following morning, a team Marcus deployed investigated the location on the card. It was a formal corporate building downtown, not the dubious warehouse one would expect for an ambush. The enterprise listed was a security company with no apparent criminal connections. It could still be a deception, Marcus observed in the briefing, but a far more sophisticated one than we typically encounter. So, what is the plan? Elena asked. Vincent looked up. We proceed with extreme vigilance. Marcus will take the meeting with a complete security detail. You will remain here. But they asked for me by name, which is the precise reason you will not attend. Vincent's tone was absolute. If their information is real, they do not require your presence. And if it is a trap, we are not about to deliver them their principal target. Elena wanted to object, but his reasoning was unassailable. Fine, but I demand a full debriefing. You will receive it, Marcus assured her. That night, Elena paced her room, feeling utterly confined while Marcus was out. Her mind replayed a dozen horrific possibilities: a setup, an assassination, a betrayal. Every noise in the corridor felt like a potential danger. He did not return until well past midnight. He discovered her waiting up, fully dressed, sleep having been a complete impossibility. Well? She inquired. Marcus poured a drink for himself first. It was authentic. In a manner of speaking, explain, the informant is part of a splinter group from within our own organization. Men loyal to Adrian who despise the new leadership since his elimination. They are attempting a takeover. No, they are providing intelligence for a price. Marcus took a long sip. They have named the traitor, the one who provided Chen's crew with the information about the wedding. Who was it? Michael Romano, the family's legal counsel, the same man who had challenged her at her first formal dinner. It should have been a shocking revelation, but it felt as if it was always him. For what motive? She asked. Greed. Adrian was on the verge of completely reorganizing the family's legal affairs, which would have made Romano redundant. So he went to Chen, offering to help eliminate Adrian for a new position. Marcus's expression was a mask of cold fury. Now Chen is dead, but Romano is still in our midst, selling information to any willing buyer. What is your strategy? To do what is necessary. Marcus set his glass down. There is something else. This group, Adrian's loyalists, they want payment for this intelligence. And what is that? Marcus looked directly at her. They want you to hold real power in this family. For Vincent to formally name you as Adrian's successor for more than just the assets. They believe the family is rudderless without Adrian's direction, and they see you as its new compass. Elena sank into a chair. They don't know the first thing about me. They know you possess sound discernment. They know you negotiated with the tenant representative rather than simply crushing her. They see you operating legitimate businesses in an upright manner. Marcus moved closer. They believe you can guide this family to a future with less bloodshed. That is absurd. I have zero influence here. You have more than you realize. You possess Vincent's respect. You have my respect. Even Caruso concedes that you are competent. Marcus knelt in front of her. This faction is proposing a partnership, support from within our own ranks. In return, they want you to push for reform, for legitimate enterprises, and a pivot away from crime. What course do I follow? She wondered. He cautioned. You need to be exceedingly careful. This is either your ascension or a masterfully set trap. His hand covered hers. But if this is what you want, genuine authority beyond managing assets, this is the only avenue. You gather your allies. You make yourself so vital they cannot envision this family functioning without you. The full weight of it descended on Elena. Romano is dealt with tomorrow night. Vincent wants a public demonstration, a warning to any other traitors. Marcus's voice was devoid of emotion. You do not have to watch it. I have to. He pulled back. To hold any true power here, Elena said, I must understand this life entirely, particularly its darkest aspects. She met his gaze directly. I need to see what is called justice in this world. For a long moment, Marcus just observed her expression. You may not appreciate what you find. I probably won't, she conceded, but it is necessary for me to see it. The next evening, the family assembled in a private chamber of the mansion. Not the main hall or Vincent's study, but a room Elena never knew existed. Windowless, entirely soundproofed, with a single chair fastened to the center of the floor. 2 guards dragged Romano in. He attempted to retain some dignity, but Elena caught the terror that flashed in his eyes as he saw Vincent waiting for him. Michael. Vincent's voice was deceptively mild. You served this family for 12 years. You managed our legal affairs with skill and discretion. I entrusted you with my confidence. Sir, I do not know what you have been told. Stop. The mildness was gone. We possess confessions from 4 different individuals. We have the bank records that show the payments from Chen's syndicate. We have call logs, messages. We possess everything required. All color drained from Romano's face. It was not personal. Adrian was about to dismantle all that we had built. Adrian was about to legitimize us, Vincent corrected. There is a vast difference. He gave Marcus a slight nod. As Marcus moved toward him holding a pistol, a nauseating feeling twisted in Elena's stomach. She had insisted on being here, to know this world, but the reality was a horror beyond her imagination. Wait! Elena's word cut through the charged atmosphere. Every head turned in her direction. Marcus shot her a look that screamed for her silence. His punishment for Adrian's death must be made public, she insisted, her voice far more assured than she felt. The other families are circling, sensing weakness. They need to see that we deal with our own traitors, that our house remains strong. Vincent mulled that over. You want a spectacle? I want to send a message so powerful that every rival in the city will understand it. Romano began to strain against his bonds. You cannot do this. This is a summary execution. This is justice, Vincent replied with a frigid smile. And the girl is correct. We must ensure everyone comprehends the price of betrayal. Marcus, arrange it. 3 days from now. Send invitations to the other families, all the principal figures. I want them all to witness it. Marcus put his firearm away. It will be done. They dragged Romano from the room, his shouts echoing down the corridor. Soon, only Elena, Marcus, and Vincent remained. That was a masterstroke, Vincent said to her. Practical, ruthless. Adrian was always too sentimental for such actions, but you understand what is required. A wave of revulsion passed over Elena, but her face was a mask of steel. I understand that power is the only language this world respects. Excellent. In that case, you are going to appreciate the proposal I am about to offer. Vincent leaned back in his chair. I am an old man, Elena. This life wears you down quickly. I have about 5 good years left to run this organization. Adrian was meant to succeed me, with Marcus as his enforcer, but my son is dead. And Marcus? He glanced at his other son. Marcus is a prodigy at his craft, but he was not made to be the king. He is the ghost in the darkness, not the man on the throne. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he did not contest the point. I am offering you a seat at the table, Vincent continued. Real authority. You will continue to expand the legitimate enterprises, serve as our public face, and build the connections we need in the legitimate world. Marcus will oversee security and the necessary field work. Together, the two of you will lead this family into the future. Here we witness the moment of anointing, where Elena's internal chaos is met with the cold calculus of dynastic succession. The offer to succeed Adrian is not merely a proposal, it is a diagnosis of the old regime's failings. Vincent posits that while Adrian possessed foresight, he lacked the stomach for the grim necessities of power. In Elena, he perceives a synthesis of both vision and visceral fortitude. Vincent's departure is a strategic retreat, leaving Elena to grapple with the architect of her ascent, Marcus. Her accusation is not a question but a statement of fact, recognizing the intricate web of maneuvers that guided her to this exact precipice. Marcus's lack of denial is itself a confession. He confirms her status not as a pawn, but as a sovereign in her own right, possessing the precise assets the syndicate was missing. A mind for grand strategy, a disarming facade concealing a core of steel, and a gift for diplomacy Adrian, with his known softness, could never master. When questioned on his motives, Marcus reveals a complex blend of pragmatism and personal entanglement. His primary objective is self-preservation, the freedom to operate as the enforcer he is without pretense. Yet this is intertwined with a deeper, more protective impulse to keep Elena within his sphere of influence, shielded from the organization's myriad enemies who would seize her as a vulnerability. He concedes this is not the complete picture. His hand, cradling her jaw, signals a shift from the political to the personal. The ultimate prize, he implies, is the partnership itself, the chance to construct an empire together, and in doing so, to resolve the turbulent, unspoken contract between them. Elena's response articulates the chasm between her past self and her potential future. The weight of her late husband's legitimate enterprises feels immense. The prospect of co-piloting a criminal empire seems a descent into madness. The space between them becomes a symbol of the twisted, paradoxical nature of their bond. Elena anticipates the court of whispers, the inevitable narrative that she is a usurper, a black widow manipulating her way to power. Marcus dismisses this as irrelevant noise. In their autocratic world, he asserts, only the sovereign's opinion, Vincent's, holds currency. All others will either bend the knee or be removed from the board. This is the unassailable logic of their reality. Elena presses for definition, for a name to give their alliance. If she accepts this throne, what becomes of them? His silence is telling before he offers the only answer their world allows, a doctrine of caution and control. They must be strategic, denying their enemies any weapon while ceasing to deny the truth of their connection to themselves. It is, she notes, a ghost of an answer to which he can only reply that it is all he has to give. What he offers is not a fairy tale, but a sworn oath of fealty, a pledge to be her unwavering shield and sword. He commits to her vision, whether it be the reconstruction of the family's empire or its complete, systematic dismantling into legitimacy. He would, he vows, help her tear down the very foundations his father laid. This is his answer to the unasked question of what follows the immediate crisis. His loyalty is not to the institution, but to her as its leader. Whatever path she forges, he will walk it with her. In response, Elena initiates a kiss that transcends romance. It is a raw transference of every unspoken fear, ambition, and terrifying resolve. A physical seal on the brutal, profound connection forged in the crucible of their shared nightmare. As they part, his question about her decision is met with a calculated ambiguity. A maybe. This is not indecision, but a demand for empirical proof. Elena must know if the act of ordering Romano's fate is a burden she can truly bear. She must test the weight of the crown before she agrees to wear it. His acquiescence is swift. In 3 days, the trial will provide her answer. The chosen venue, a Virelli-owned warehouse, is a carefully selected theater of power, neutral ground to ensure attendance, yet isolated enough to guarantee absolute control over the proceedings. Elena's choice of attire is a deliberate act of political stagecraft. A stark black suit and severe hairstyle cast her as a figure of mourning and authority, attending a funeral for the old order. The warehouse is arranged as an arena, with the heads of the city's major crime families as spectators to a grim performance. Romano kneels on a platform, the centerpiece of this ritual of punishment. Elena takes her seat at the epicenter of power, flanked by Vincent and Marcus, her clasped hands the only sign of the tremor beneath her composed exterior. Vincent rises, his address a formal declaration of judgment. He articulates Romano's sin, betrayal leading to the death of his son, and reminds the assembly of the singular, immutable penalty dictated by their code. Before the sentence is carried out, however, Vincent pivots to the true purpose of the gathering, the presentation of a new power. He introduces Elena not as a grieving widow, but as a vital asset who has assumed control of Adrian's interests. From this day forward, he decrees, her voice will be the family's voice in all legitimate matters. A murmur ripples through the assembly as they recalibrate their understanding of the board, assessing this new peace. At Marcus's quiet command, Elena rises to face the conclave of predators who rule the city, her gaze an unwavering challenge. Vincent then delivers his masterstroke, revealing that this public spectacle was her design. He credits her with the strategy, framing her as the architect of this clear message. The family has not merely recovered from the recent attack, but has metamorphosed into something more formidable. The execution of Romano is thus transformed from a simple act of revenge into a statement of her own ascendant, ruthless authority. As Marcus ascends the platform and draws his weapon, Romano's muffled pleas begin. Elena remains a stoic observer, her eyes wide open, forcing herself to witness the brutal transaction of power she is being offered. The gunshot echoes, a deafening finality. Romano falls. This, she understands, is the price of her potential reign. Not a single member of the audience flinches. For this assembly, the execution was merely a grim business transaction, Marcus returns to his seat with the impassive air of a man completing a mundane task, his face an unreadable cipher. Vincent then delivers the homily, a stark warning that this image should be seared into the mind of any other would-be traitor. The Varelli family's core principles remain. They protect their own and annihilate their enemies, but now with renewed strength and unity. The meeting dissolves into a flurry of political theater, with representatives from rival syndicates hurrying to reaffirm their allegiance. A few approach Elena, offering condolences for Adrian that are transparently political overtures. She engages the charade, a hollow clarity settling within her. This is her new ecosystem, a world of violence and ambition cloaked in tailored suits and polite discourse. Later, in the quiet of the estate, Marcus finds her gazing into the darkness. His question of her well-being prompts a stark confession. She witnessed him end a man's life, an act she implicitly sanctioned, and the dominant emotion was not horror, but relief that a threat had been neutralized. He attempts to frame this as pragmatism, the mark of a realist, not a monster. But she challenges this with a dark laugh, noting the profound psychological shift. A month prior, the act would have shattered her. Now her mind is already calculating how to leverage this act to consolidate their power. What does that make me? Is a question of identity in this new moral landscape. Marcus closes the distance, offering a comforting interpretation. She is a survivor, one who adapts rather than breaks, strong enough to navigate this world without forfeiting her soul. His proof is her very question. He posits that the loss of one's soul occurs not with the act, but with the cessation of questioning the act. One is lost only when they stop wondering if they have gone too far. Yet, despite his words, Elena feels the pull of an inevitable conclusion, a choice already made in the silent chambers of her heart. "I'm taking Vincent's offer," she announces, solidifying the unspoken decision. She will help steer the family's future. In his embrace, Marcus seeks final confirmation, and she admits her uncertainty, yet proceeds with an unshakable resolve. She presents her one condition, not as a request, but as a term of her ascension. They must operate as a unified entity, a true diarchy. No more separation between the public face and the shadow hand. They will be partners in every sense, each move approved by the other. For her to commit, she needs to know he is not her protector or her handler, but her equal, standing beside her. Marcus considers this restructuring of power, this radical shift in their operational doctrine, and concedes. He accepts the title of partner, even acknowledging that he will defer to her superior strategic vision in moments of conflict. "And the other thing between us?" she asks, addressing the unspoken personal treaty. Marcus pulls her closer, defining their connection as a complication that courts disaster, but one he is no longer willing to deny. He wants it, wants her. She acknowledges the political risk, the whispers their bond will generate. "Let them," he counters, his kiss both slow and absolute. "It is the action of a man who has spent a lifetime serving the family's needs, who for the first time is seizing something purely for himself, merging the demands of duty with the pull of desire." When Elena returned his kiss, a knot of anxiety she had carried for weeks finally began to unravel. The situation remained perilous, intricate, and a profound error in judgment, but was authentic. At that moment, authenticity was the only currency that held value. A knock on the door fractured their proximity. "Miss Elena," came Maria's voice. "Mr. Vincent requests your presence in his study." Marcus withdrew, his expression resetting to a disciplined neutrality. "I will accompany you." Vincent's study was saturated with the aroma of cigars as they entered. The old Don appeared weary but satisfied. "Sit," he commanded. Elena complied. Marcus took a position behind her chair, a silent column of reinforcement. "The other families were impressed by tonight's display," Vincent announced. "You made a significant impact. Inquiries were made about your future with us. I informed them you are being groomed for the legitimate enterprises, with potential for advancement." Elena pressed forward, "And the result?" "They are observant, but not hostile. In our sphere, that is the equivalent of a welcome." Vincent poured 3 glasses of whiskey, distributing them. "I am making your position official. You are now a full associate of the family. You will have access to all financial records, a seat at all strategic meetings, and your vote will carry the same weight as Marcus's." Elena accepted the glass, her hand betraying a slight tremor. "Thank you. Reserve your gratitude. This position carries a heavy price. You are now a symbol, a target. Adversaries will try to eliminate you, corrupt you, or turn you against us. Every action you take is a reflection upon this family." "I understand." Vincent lifted his glass. "To the future of the Varley family, may we have the strength to endure it." They drank, the liquor carving a fiery path down Elena's throat. In the ensuing 3 months, Elena discovered the true depth of her new dominion. The legitimate businesses were merely the visible surface. Beneath them lay operations that spanned the spectrum from morally ambiguous to overtly criminal. Money laundering, protection rackets, smuggling. She could not excise the rot all at once, but initiated calculated changes, diverting capital into clean investments to one day supplant the illicit funds, and forging alliances with individuals who could aid their transition to legitimacy. The work was a slow, arduous process of transformation, yet she was making tangible progress. Adrian's loyalists, the very men who had unmasked Romano, formed her base of power. They navigated the currents of internal politics for her, supplied intelligence on emerging threats, and championed her proposals even when they sparked dissent. Marcus honored his vow to be a true partner. Their conflicts were sometimes fierce and loud, clashes over tactics and ultimate objectives. But they always found a resolution, a compromise that balanced the imperatives of security with the drive toward legitimacy. And in private, shielded from the family's watchful eyes, they were cultivating something that was beginning to resemble a genuine bond. They carved out hours for themselves in Marcus's office after the household fell silent. They found quiet mornings in Elena's suite before the day's chaos began. They exchanged swift, guarded touches in corridors when they believed themselves unobserved. It was not a normal existence. It would never be normal, but it belonged to them. 6 months after Adrian's death, Vincent convened another family council. "I am stepping down," he declared without ceremony. "My health is in decline. I am ceding daily operations to Elena and Marcus. They will lead this family as one. Elena will manage the legitimate ventures and public affairs. Marcus will oversee security and internal discipline." The declaration was met with a spectrum of reactions. Some men nodded, as if anticipating this succession. Others appeared dubious, yet no one voiced opposition. Vincent's decree was still absolute. "Are there any questions?" Vincent inquired. Caruso raised a hand. "What happens in the event of a major disagreement? Who holds the deciding vote?" Vincent's gaze shifted between Elena and Marcus. They will resolve it. I will not govern from my retirement. After the assembly, Elena located Marcus in the armory, where he was systematically cleaning his firearms. This is actually happening, she stated softly, so it would seem. He did not look up from his task. Are you prepared for this? Marcus placed the weapon down and finally met her gaze. Are you? I asked you first. A faint smile touched his lips. I am terrified. You have been here 6 months and you already command half the family. I have been here my entire life, and I have never carried this level of responsibility. We will manage it, together, correct? Marcus rose and moved toward her. Because inevitably we will collide on a critical issue, one with no clear resolution. What is our protocol then? Elena had spent sleepless nights contemplating that very question. Then we communicate until we discover a solution we can both accept. That is the nature of a partnership. And if we cannot find one, then we toss a coin. She was only partially jesting. Or we can alternate who has the final say, or engage a mediator. There are alternatives that do not involve raising everything we have constructed. Marcus drew her into an embrace. You are truly dedicated to this, to us. I am dedicated to building something superior to what existed before. Whether that constitutes an us or simply a partnership, we will define it as we proceed. Elena looked up at him. And you? Are you dedicated? To you? Yes. To this audacious plan to reform a crime syndicate from the inside? Evidently, yes to that as well. He kissed her forehead. I must be losing my mind. Likely. Elena smiled against his chest. But we are losing our minds together. The following year was a crucible. 2 more attempts were made on her life, both neutralized by Marcus's security protocols. 3 hostile takeover bids from rival families were repelled by Elena's strategic alliances and Marcus's ruthless effectiveness. A federal investigation came perilously close to indicting senior members before Elena's legal team discovered a technicality that led to its complete dismissal. But they endured. And they did more than survive. They began to prosper. The real estate portfolio expanded. Elena acquired 3 new hotels and a small restaurant chain, all operating cleanly and profitably. This new revenue stream allowed her to dismantle 2 protection rackets and a smuggling operation, transitioning the personnel into legitimate employment. For some, the pace of change was agonizingly slow. Adrian's old guard demanded more radical reforms, but for the old school members, it was happening far too quickly. Several of the old guard chose to leave the family rather than evolve. Marcus stood by her through every crisis, endorsing her decisions publicly while providing unvarnished truth in private about what was possible versus what was purely aspirational. He was the one who managed the individuals who required managing, while she constructed the bridges that would guide them toward legitimacy. They learned each other's cadences, their strengths, and their most profound vulnerabilities. They learned when to apply pressure and when to relent. They learned to contend without destroying each other and how to support without condescending. And somewhere within that crucible, the deliberate distance they had maintained began to vaporize. It started with small gestures, Marcus's hand resting on the small of her back during meetings. Elena began to communicate through subtle gestures. A light touch on his arm, a gaze held a moment too long. A silent language was forming between them. Then one evening, after a particularly grueling negotiation, Marcus took refuge in her room and simply did not depart. They never discussed it, never applied a label to what was happening. Their connection remained in the shadows, meticulously discreet. The fear of exposure was a constant threat, but behind closed doors, they were forging a bond that was dangerously authentic. 18 months after Adrian's death, Vincent sent for Elena. The old Don looked frail. The illness he had long concealed was now ascendant. He was huddled in a chair, shrouded in a blanket despite the summer heat. "Sit down," he rasped, his voice thin. "How are you?" she asked. "Like a man who is dying because I am," he replied with a faint smile. "The doctors have given me 6 months, perhaps fewer." A weight settled in Elena's chest. Vincent had given her a genuine opportunity, supporting her vision for the family even when it contradicted his own ingrained methods. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Do not be," he said. "I have outlived most men in our profession, erected an empire, and evaded more attempts on my life than I can recall." He needed assurance that the family was in stable hands. "It will be. Marcus and I—" But Vincent interrupted her. "I am aware of what you two are doing. Do not feign surprise." It seemed he was not blind after all. "You think you are subtle, but Maria has been my source of intelligence for many years." Elena was exposed. "Sir, I—" "Do not. I am indifferent to who you share your bed with, so long as you guide my family correctly. And that you are doing." His gaze meets hers directly. "But this requires your formal acceptance. The personal dynamics are yours to navigate. I speak of leadership. His proposal is a shared throne, a partnership of equals." Vincent confesses with stark candor, "Adrian was my favored son." Marcus is aware. Yet Marcus was forged for this world, and you surpass them both. He identifies in her a synthesis of Adrian's foresight and Marcus's resolve. Together you could grant this family legitimacy without its ruin. A knot forms in Elena's throat, and if we do not succeed, then you do not succeed. But your failure, should it come, will be in pursuit of innovation, not in defense of my legacy," Vincent declared, his hand closing over hers. "I am proud of you, Elena. Adrian's intent was your rescue, but you became our salvation." 3 weeks pass, and Vincent Varelli's life ends peacefully. His funeral becomes a grand spectacle of influence, drawing every significant family, along with a roster of civic leaders. By the graveside, Elena and Marcus present an unbroken facade. Her attire proclaims her a Varellian truth, while Marcus stands as a bastion of control, his sorrow deeply submerged. After, the subsequent gathering is held at their seat of power. A parade of mourners extends feigned condolences, each one searching for fissures in the new regime's foundation now that its patriarch has fallen. Elena navigates this flawlessly, her gratitude a mask for unyielding power. But when the final guest departs and silence reclaims the manor, she discovers Marcus in the study. He occupies his father's chair, his gaze fixed, a glass of whiskey sitting untouched. "Hey," she says with quiet intimacy. He turns, his eyes betraying grief without tears. "He is truly gone." "Indeed." Elena settles herself on the edge of the desk. "How are you holding up?" "I am adrift. He was a tyrannical patriarch who sculpted me into a version of myself I despise," Marcus confesses, his tone hollow. "But he was my father. Am I now expected to simply occupy his throne?" "You are not replacing him. We are building something entirely new," she asserts, her hand finding his. "Are we, truly?" he questions. "Or are we engaged in the performance of reforming a malignant empire?" He vocalizes the one truth she has been evading. "We are instituting change," she contends. "Methodical but tangible. 3 operations have been dismantled. 6 legitimate enterprises launched. We've cultivated new alliances." And 2 men were eliminated on my authority last month, Marcus retorts, retracting his hand. Do not dress this in softer language, Elena. We remain executioners in finer attire. So, what is your alternative? We abdicate. Simply walk away? I don't know what I want. He turns to the window. Vincent believed we could transform this. What if he was mistaken? What if this is the pinnacle of our potential? Then we make it incrementally less monstrous, and then less so again. We persist until we have constructed an enterprise that inspires pride. That process could span decades. Then it shall span decades. She compels him to face her. I did not commit to this because it was simple, Marcus. I committed because it held meaning. He gazes at her for a drawn-out moment, then envelops her in an embrace, clinging to her as if to a precipice. I love you, he whispers, the admission startling them both. Everyone I love is ultimately broken by this existence. I love you as well, and I am not abandoning this post. You cannot guarantee that. Yes, I can, because this was my deliberate choice. I chose you. I chose this chaotic, perilous existence where we attempt to rehabilitate a crime syndicate while navigating our own love. She pulls away to meet his gaze. I am entirely invested, Marcus. I have been since the moment I declined Vincent's offer of escape. He kisses her, and this contact feels different. It conveys a covenant, not a supplication. As they part, she rests her forehead against his. We will endure this. What gives you such certainty? Because we face this united, not in isolation. A smile touches her lips. And because your father had faith in us, that must carry some weight. A sound escapes Marcus, half laugh, half sob. He would likely despise what we've become, the sentimental enforcer and the defiant widow. He would be captivated, Elena insists, guiding him toward the desk. There is work to be done. Just grant me a moment. Take all the time you need. He composes himself, his expression now a mask of calm resolve. All right. 5 years after Adrian's death, the Varley dynasty has metamorphosed into a different creature entirely. Of their 9 illicit operations, 7 have been shuttered, repurposed into legitimate businesses. The remaining 2, gaming and high-risk finance, are on a 2-year timeline for complete legitimization. The landscape remains treacherous, with adversaries perpetually circling. Yet the era of ceaseless bloodshed has subsided. The currency of fear, which Vincent so readily spent, is being exchanged for genuine respect. Elena now presides over the legitimate ventures with clinical precision, becoming a civic figure known for shrewd negotiations and ambitious developments. Indeed, whispers of her underworld connections persist, but they remain unsubstantiated. She sits on philanthropic boards and frequents galas, forcing open doors that the Varley name had once bolted shut. Marcus, too, has undergone a profound change. He is still the guardian, but his team now neutralizes threats without generating a body count. He is remarkably enrolled in university, studying business and criminal justice. A year after Vincent's passing, they made their union public. There would be no more concealment. The family was simply forced to acclimate. No one spoke against it, but a palpable judgment saturated the atmosphere. Elena was a force of nature, and Marcus was the live current one dared not touch. They found refuge from the city at a location not meant for living, but for breathing, a sanctuary that belonged to them, not the family. And on a Saturday, 5 years and 3 months after Adriana's memory took residence, Marcus proposed. As dawn broke, he presented a ring, his voice low. "Listen, I know how this will be perceived," he began. "The speculation will be rampant, too hasty for them, far too delayed for us. But I require this. I require you. I must close this chapter of uncertainty." Her gaze shifted from the ring to his face, absorbing the weight of his words. 5 years, she articulated, the number itself a heavy presence. The whispers will become a roar. That I moved on too quickly, that I desecrated his memory, that I was yours, even while I was his. Marcus's hand, offering the ring, trembled slightly. "Does their verdict alter your own?" Adrian's specter appeared in her mind, kind, gentle, expiring in her arms, a debt she could never repay. She had mourned him, a perpetual ache in her soul, but the guilt had eroded with time. Loving Marcus was not an erasure of Adrian. It was a refusal to become a living memorial. "No," she breathed. "It changes nothing. Yes, I will marry you." The ring, an elegant band of platinum and diamonds, fit perfectly. "Flawless," he murmured, drawing her into a kiss that ratified 1,000 unspoken agreements. This was not her first induction into the Varley clan, but it was the first time it was her own volition. This was not a transaction for security. It was a partnership forged at the crucible of chaos with a man who recognized her own inner darkness and did not recoil. "We are utterly mad," she whispered against his lips. A small smile formed. "We were always mad. This merely formalizes it." 3 months later, they wed discreetly at the estate, witnessed only by their most loyal confederates, far from the intrusive gaze and opulent halls of their former life. 5 years later, Maria stood beside her once more, as if history were replaying itself. This time, however, the hands adjusting the gown were unwavering. The woman in the reflection was not a terrified girl, bartered for safety, but a sovereign, assuming a destiny of her own making. "You seem happy," Maria observed quietly. "I am," Elena affirmed, her gaze fixed on her reflection. The cream-colored gown, not stark white, felt like an honest statement. "Is this perverse?" she asked the room. "After everything." Maria's eyes misted over. "Mr. Adrian, he would have desired this for you. He was aware you did not love him. He only wished you would find someone you could." "Can I believe," Maria continued, "he would be glad it was Mr. Marcus." The ceremony was a brief, pragmatic event, officiated by a judge long on their payroll. Elena's vows were not mere platitudes. They were anchors cast directly into Marcus's eyes. His promises in return were equally steadfast, a pledge to share the burden. Their kiss felt less like a conclusion and more like the first page of a new, untamed narrative. The garden reception that followed possessed an atmosphere her first, sterile wedding could never achieve. The joy was authentic, a defiant gesture against the suffocating theatrics of Vincent's regime. As evening descended, Elena slipped away to a terrace, surveying the fragile peace they had forged. He discovered her there, his arms encircling her from behind. "What are you observing?" he inquired. "The distance," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "The radical difference in everything. 5 years ago, I stood in a ballroom while my husband was dying. Tonight, I am wed to his brother, a queen within his dominion." She paused. "It has been a tumultuous journey." A shadow of sorrow touched her expression. "I will forever regret Adrian's absence. That events had to unfold this way." She turned to him, her eyes locking with his. "But I do not regret us. Never this." He kissed her forehead. "Nor do I." They remained there, watching the celebration, simultaneously burdened and redeemed by their survival. So what comes next? Elena's question was a quiet murmur in the dark. Now, he answered, a faint smile playing on his lips. We continue to build. We transform this family name into something that is not synonymous with a curse. He continued, perhaps one day we might discover a semblance of a normal life within this fractured world. I would welcome that, she said, rising to kiss him, but not immediately. There is still so much to repair. Perpetually, Marcus concurred, holding her tight. But we do it together. 10 years after Adrienne's death, Elena Varley addressed the city council. She presented a comprehensive plan for urban revitalization, affordable housing, and job creation centers, a genuine opportunity for those discarded by the system. Every single dollar was sourced legitimately from clean Varley enterprises, bearing no stain of criminal enterprise. The council's endorsement was unanimous. Marcus stood waiting outside, a solid, unspoken pillar of support. A decade had etched new lines into their faces, hardening some areas, softening others. But the connection between them, tempered by conflict and loss, was immutable. The outcome was his only question. Approved. We break ground next month. She took his hand, adding, the Varley name is now constructing homes instead of destroying them. An unvoiced thought passed between them. Vincent would despise this. Adrienne would have championed it. Their journey back to the estate was filled with a tranquil satisfaction they had profoundly earned. A novel sort of quiet had taken hold of the estate, one with fewer guards and diminished shadows. The old empire had been methodically disassembled, its corrupt core supplanted with a foundation capable of withstanding scrutiny. Phantoms still lingered, old rivals who recalled only the family's transgressions, but the transformation was undeniable. That night, lying beside Marcus, Elena's thoughts drifted to the young woman she once was, arriving at this very house in a bloodied wedding dress. A frightened creature, certain her life was over. Yet she had not merely survived, she had seized control, transmuting a world designed to crush her into her own domain, building a life worth defending from the ashes of her past. The reason for your smile, Marcus murmured, still in a state of slumber. Us, she breathed. Our success. Success in what? In everything. She drew nearer to him. We dismantled a corrupt dynasty and erected a legitimate one. We endured assassins, competitors, and the authorities. From the ruins of what we were, we forged something real. We were victorious. He held her closer still. Our victory is ongoing, he amended. Each new day is a triumph. To our endurance, then, she responded, sealing it with a kiss. Beyond the glass, the urban expanse promised a future. The abyss that had claimed her 5 years prior had not vanished. It had become an integrated feature of her new landscape. Now, however, she could navigate that darkness, shaping it to her purpose, wielding it as a tool rather than allowing it to consume her. She had manifested into the formidable presence Marcus had always perceived, an elemental force. The game had shifted. She was no longer a disposable piece on the board, but a sovereign who had seized her own crown through intellect, courage, and an unbreakable resolve to never again submit. Where the original Varelli dynasty was founded on violence, Elena's new order was built upon the bedrock of her own volition. This is the authority born from authoring one's own destiny. It was not the existence she had envisioned, but one she claimed, battled for, and ultimately deserved. And that distinction was everything.
Life lesson: love that begins as rescue must evolve into choice or it becomes tragedy. The story moves like a film soaked in candlelight and gunpowder. A white dress, a ballroom glowing gold, a bride standing beneath chandeliers that look too beautiful for the darkness gathering underneath them. Elena enters her marriage like someone stepping into a myth she does not fully believe, and by the end of the first dance, the myth is burning in her hands. Adrian dies not as a villain nor as a fool, but as a man who wanted to save someone with the only power he knew how to offer. That is what makes his death so heartbreaking. He does not fail because he does not care. He fails because care alone cannot outrun the violence of the world he was born into. Then the camera turns and there is Marcus, not soft, not safe, not gentle. He is all shadow, scar tissue, and buried grief. He locks doors to protect her. He commands because command is the only language that ever kept him alive. In another story, he would be the monster. In this story, he is something more painful, a man who does not know how to love without first turning love into control. That is why Elena matters. She is not there to be rescued forever. She is there to demand transformation. She forces the emotional architecture of the story to change. She refuses to remain a passive symbol of suffering. The widow becomes a strategist. The protected woman becomes a partner. And in that evolution lies the lesson. Because rescue is not love's highest form. Rescue is only the beginning. It is what happens when danger is immediate. But real love begins later, in the quieter and harder moment, when two people must decide whether they will stand beside each other as equals rather than savior and saved. The lesson this tragedy leaves behind is exquisite and cruel. Being saved is not the same as being seen. Being wanted is not the same as being chosen. Only when love makes room for agency, dignity, and shared burden does it stop being a dramatic gesture and become a life worth building.